Hey, what's up? I want to kind of apologize in advance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to blast through right now, and I'm just going to reveal some stuff here. And I just want to apologize that it's going to be more half-baked because otherwise it would never happen if I don't do this. This is for my Bible-believing friends. If you are not a Bible believer and you could give a shit, then I would suggest that you just tune out now. Otherwise, you are warned ahead of time not to take any offense, and I'm not revealing anything other than what's publicly available, and these opinions are my own stupid interpretations of things, and I'm not making any claim that these are the be-all, end-all opinions on any of this, and I'm probably mostly wrong and probably barely scratching the surface of what I'm about to talk about right here. So this is for, like I said, you, my Bible-believing friends, and I just want to let you know, I want to expose the deception that most of us are being pushed into, and kind of, now that the election has recently passed here, who cares what the result is? Honestly, it's time to get past this. You know what I mean? The result is bad. The result, if it isn't bad today, it will be bad tomorrow. This is of earth. This is of mammon things. This is of materialistic possessions and whatnot, and our temporary life here that we don't believe in YOLO. We don't believe in you only live once. We believe that this is sort of what the opposite, the inverse of what, some other religious groups might call purgatory. That's what this life existence is to a true Bible believer, because we believe that, God willing, that we will inherit a rejuvenated earth. We're probably not going to heaven, okay? I mean, if you read the Bible literally, then you'll know that chances are you're not going to heaven. You know what I mean? It's just, that's the way the Bible's written. And hell is not something where you go and get poked by a guy with a freaking pitchfork forever and ever and ever. That's not what it is. That's Greek mythology. That's being pushed on you. Hades is Greek. That is not biblical. The word hell is simply the Hebrew word for grave. Look it up if you don't believe me. And that's all it means, is death. Eternal death. You will eternally be dead. That's what the Bible says. There is some references in the Old Testament that can be construed and stuff like that, but the thing is that you have to go with the Hebraic thought and the Hebraic idioms to truly understand that stuff. And even a lot of Jewish people don't even seem to completely grasp those older idioms. The modern Hebrew is actually, some people call it the square Aramaic script, which there's some accuracy to that. It is not Hebrew. That is Chaldean script. I mean, of course, people call it Hebrew and whatever. That's the loose terminology, the common misconception, misnomer for it, but that is not Hebrew at all. The real Hebrew is it's both pictographic and alphabetical. So anyway, I'll get started here. So here's something I just noticing on InfoWars. I notice this all the time on there, especially lately. Alex Jones and company are having things like, you see this little Roman soldier, idolistic statue placed down here. For a while, Alex Jones was having things on his desk. I would say over the summer probably was when he was doing that the most. Very idolic symbology. He claims to be a Bible believer, but he's not. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to pass judgment on anybody. I'm not trying to persecute anybody, but actions blast far louder than words do. And the guy, I mean, he even had a commercial. I can't find it, looking it up, but I saw it only once. I heard it, and it was a recent one. And he was talking about how one of his copper supplements or something, and he was going off about how it was used in a ceremony to worship the god Zeus and stuff like this, and it's such a great supplement and everything, and it's like, dude, Zeus is not biblical. We all know that. That's ancient Roman religion. Come on now. You know what I mean? So this guy, and what is behind them every single time? It's either A, the so-called Statue of Liberty, or it is a domed pagan basilica. You know, you could call it a Capitol building or something like that, but those Capitol buildings come from, you know, I'm not trying to say whatever, you know, those are the Capitol buildings. We come from Rome. That's obvious. Like, you go to Washington, D.C., you go to the capitals of a lot of these states and stuff like that, it's Roman architecture. That, you know, it's very Roman architecture, undeniably so. And that shows the roots, and there's a lot of people who know and believe in that stuff. And what's so funny is that you know, not even funny in my opinion, but it's called mythology, but there's a lot of people who believe that and practice that to this day. All these religions that people practice, those are state pagan religions. Holidays and stuff, and a lot of religions too are state pagan religions, literally. And like I said, I'm not trying to like judge anybody or persecute. Definitely no persecution to any group whatsoever. You know, I wouldn't want to be persecuted, so I definitely wouldn't want to persecute anybody else. This is for my biblical believing brothers and sisters, so that you can see where they've poured the shit water in with your drink. You know what I mean? That's their stuff. Keep it out. Keep yourself pure. You need to, I mean, we can never achieve perfect purity in this life, but we need to strive for it. You know what I mean? Everything in the New Testament, especially, is about striving for protection, knowing that we are, for protection is a good way to put it, but towards the perfection of the Savior, Yahweh Yeshua. His name is not Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. I know that's a jagged pill to swallow, and I'm not saying you're going to go to hell or anything like that if you use that term. You know, everybody's in their own walk, and they will get where they're going eventually. But that name is imposed. Even the letter J being in the English language and pronounced like J is only a couple hundred, you know, arguably a little more than a couple hundred years old, but not much more, and has only been in popular usage for the last just over 200 years within the English language, you know. So what was the name? It wasn't even written as Jesus in the original King James Version. It was written as Jesus, you know, look it up. And whatever, even if you want to say, oh, well, that was just the old way to say Joshua. And it's like, no, it isn't. Joshua or Yehoshua or Yeshua, those are the old ways to say Joshua, right? It wasn't Jesus. And the thing is do you think the Savior's going to come and reuse a name of a guy from the Old Testament when, you know, the first Joshua, Yehoshua, he got, you know, the one who marched around, the first one to enter the promised land, right? And marched around and blew the horns. He got to have an original name. Why? I would assume, I mean, maybe there were people before him with that name, but why would the Savior not have a unique name? Why would the unique Son not have a unique name? And the thing is that he does have a unique name, and he says himself that he came in his Father's name. He came with his Father's name. You know what I mean? What was his Father's name? It was Yod, He, Vav, He, or however you want to say those Hebrew glyphs, right? And you can say those, they're consonants, and you can say them, they're not ineffable. That's an old, not even that old of a Jewish practice, but that's a Jewish practice. I'm not persecuting anybody, but I'm saying, hey, we're not going by this modern Kabbalistic Jewish view of things. We're going by our own, and to do that, you have to interpret the Bible more literally and bypass what these other groups are saying. You know, when you come with the Jewish and the Catholic battle, there are two sort of tangents that don't gracefully embrace both halves of the Bible. And I mean, if you really want to say halves, right, the New Testament doesn't even take up as much girth as the Old Testament. And the Savior himself says that the Old Testament speaks of him. That's what validates him and everything, you know. So we are supposed to take that Old Testament as well as the New Testament. And I know, you know, if I were to say if there was ever even 100 people to watch this video, which I doubt, and I don't care. I only care about the one or two or very few people that would ever watch this. But you start losing people with that because they're like, oh, no, you know, I know people who've said they would rather go back to that Greco-Roman pagan religion than to accept the Old Testament. People who were modern-day churchgoers, you know, of a particular variety, which I don't want to single out, things like that. But anyway, so I'm just pointing out that this so-called InfoWars thing, I mean, yeah, he does do a lot of preaching, glossed over spiritualized preaching towards the overall biblical narrative and stuff, and I do appreciate that. But under the seams, there's deception here. And I'm not trying to say, this one little Roman statue or whatever is deception. I don't think it's necessarily that cut and dry and plain and simple, but I think that's what's going on. The people who are involved in deception are better than, strive to be better than us at our own game. So you've got to remember that. They're going to come and make you feel that these people are just so on your side. And these are things that the Bible tells us. These are things that the so-called bad guys tell us, or bad girls, or whoever the bad people themselves, whatever, and I don't mean bad. I'll just say the dark people, okay? And I don't mean that based on skin color or anything like that. I mean dark as in, you know what I mean, right? So beware of that kind of stuff. Look for those symbols. Don't worry about interpreting them for every little nook and cranny, you know what I mean? This is a pentagram right here. This is a 5-pointed star on its own. Big deal, right? Big deal. Like, who cares? If your kid likes to stick little stars on charts and stuff like that, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. But the thing is just think about in state how much the states worship this symbology, and I'm not trying to come across as anti-American or anything. I am totally somebody who thinks that the overall, like when I think of America and I think of like a house on a prairie kind of style thing or something, like more of that kind of a vibe, where I just think of like the natural element of America being this beautiful place where people can coexist and all these values that even this Romanized institution a lot of times is trying to protect. I value that. So, and I'm not trying to say overthrow the government or anything. That will never happen. Okay, first of all, that will never happen. There might be illusions of governments being overthrown, but this plan is in the making, right? Since the beginning of time, basically, since the beginning of earthly time, like this plan has been in the making. So there's no way that I would be so naive and dumb to say like, oh yeah, we can do this. We just got to vote for the right politician or anything. No. The other thing to pay attention is these wings out here. There's a circle around this star, then there's wings. And I'm not trying to throw out any particular interpretation of that, but just make note of that. Because we can come over here. I'll get to this. Does that look familiar? Does that look vaguely familiar? Like anything you've ever seen? Okay. What am I going for here? The wings. So I better punch in like... Not trying to pick on anybody. I'm just throwing out terms, probably spelling them wrong and everything. So there's wings sticking out. And I know that, like, to the uninitiated, that's like, okay, wow, how not exactly even coinciding of wings, right? And it's not. But if you've dug into this stuff, like people like me have, you would know that, like, these are related. Maybe not directly straight, A to B related, but A, B, C, maybe D, E, F, like through a chain like that, they are related. This is just Zoroastrianism. It's just one of a lot of ancient religions. This, oh wow, look at that hat. Persian hat, right? And that's where all this is from. This all comes from Mesopotamia, the Mesopotamia area. Meso meaning river or waters. Meso meaning middle, and Potamia meaning river or waters. And so we come in here, and what river and waters might those be that Mesopotamia speaks of? Well, right here you have the Euphrates River, right? The Euphrates River right through here. And here's the Persian Gulf, right? Here's Israel. This would be the Egyptian area right here. This would be Arabia. This would be the crescent across here. So right here you have the Euphrates going to the southwest, and the Tigris headed more north right here. And right here, Mesopotamia, between the two rivers. Right here, right? What's this word say? Oh, wow, that's pretty zoomed in there. Let me see if I can figure out where I'm at on this map. Tigris, Euphrates. come down here. Babylon, right in between these rivers here. Baghdad, right? The south end of Baghdad. What are they uncovering there? They're uncovering the Babylonian, the Ishtar palace gates and walls and all that stuff, right? Babylon. And that's just, I mean, if you're a Bible believer, you're already like, whoa, right? Or you already know this probably, but if not, you're like, whoa, you know the Tigris and Euphrates mentioned like right out the gate in Genesis. And, you know, this is where life started. And even if you go back through anthropology, it points to life starting here. Well, this is also where all these other non-biblical religions all point back to this area. The further back in time you go, the further back they're going to point back to this, no matter what that religion is called. And guess what? This is Persia. This is, you know, Iraq now specifically, but this is the Persian area, which is Iran is the Persian culture more specifically in modern time. You know, if you start making these connections, you realize there's like 5 or so different wordings for things. You know, well, here Iranian. Well, you can just as easily say Persian, you know, with whatever stuff. It's just if you go way back in time before it was called Iran, all of that stuff was called Persia. You know, and if you go way back in time before that, it was all called Babylon or whatever it was called, you know. So one thing I would suggest is studying the history on that so you can connect those dots as they go back like that, and not let some modern abstraction throw you off or cover over what you need to know about these areas and stuff. So like I said, with that hat there, that's a Persian hat. So this, like I said, it's half-baked. I apologize. This is sun worship right here. You know, I'm not persecuting anybody who's a sun worshiper. That's fine. I believe in freedom of religion. If this is the religion you believe in, then you should be able to practice that religion to the extent that it, you know, coincides with the golden rule: do unto your neighbors, you would have them do unto you. You know, don't harm your neighbor. That's what I think about that. Of course, a lot of people with a lot of religions dedicate themselves to that religion more than anything, and sometimes those religions tell people to harm their neighbors, which sucks. But and the interesting and sucky thing is that they're trying to push a lot of that. You know, I'm not necessarily saying these specific people or whatever, but in general, a lot of people are trying to push the narrative that the Bible is bad and it persecutes against people and all that stuff. And that's completely not true, especially if you take the New Testament into consideration. You could even make a lot of arguments with the Old Testament. You know, yeah, there was violence way back in the Old Testament. There was, and you go back in any culture, there was a lot of violence. Even to this day in cultures, there's a lot of violence and wars and things like that. But the Bible itself and the narrative in there evolved to say that no, there should be no more war amongst people whatsoever for any reasons. You know, when Joshua went in and took those places by force back in the day, he slaughtered everybody according to what the Bible narrative says. He, you know, men, women, children, everybody, they were slaughtered. So it was a grotesque scene, and I'll leave that to you to interpret for yourself. You know, it's not an easy thing to do always, but you know, I just say continue praying and reading and studying, and you know, not that was like a good thing, you know, that like, oh yeah, whatever, but I'll just shut up about that. But now with the Savior Yahweh Yeshua, which means Yahweh, which is those consonants in Hebrew, Yahweh saves. The Yeshua means saves. And that's what in the Bible it originally had said. It's been removed and it's been replaced with all caps Jesus, right? So you'll see in there, if you go to can't remember the verse, so it's in Matthew. You shall, I'm pretty sure, call him, call his name, whatever it says. You shall call his name capital Jesus. So anywhere in the Bible where you see an all capital name, that's suspect right there. That means probably changed. Anywhere you see all caps in the Bible, all caps G-O-D, anytime you see all caps G-O-D, they replace the term Elohim, which means basically like of powers type of a thing, which means God. effectively what we think of. God's a Greek term, but I think that's the most dangerous of the translations. It's not the biggest deal in the world. I don't have too much of a problem with Elohim being replaced by God, but it shouldn't matter. I mean, it's just a thing that whatever we're raised on to believe, like these things get burned in our thoughts, especially the younger we are. But this name, you shall call his name, for he shall save his people from their sins. Okay, well, when you break down the Hebraic meaning of this name, it is Yehoshua, which means Yah. It's Yeshua is what it is. It's basically Yahweh Shua. It's a slightly shorter nickname version of that. And that Yah is the short way of saying Yahweh, right? That name of God. So it would be a Y there in an English transliteration. And then this E doesn't even have to be there. You just like go Yah, but they put an E there. It could be an A. It could be, any short vowel sound like that. Yah or Yo. You hear some people say Yo or whatever, Jehovah, those kinds of things. Or Yahweh. So it's that Yeshua. But this was changed. Even this was changed to become this. And there's arguments about why that was so. And a lot of even those arguments are buried. But Shua means cry. It doesn't mean save. So it's saying God's cry, for he shall save his people from their sins, which makes no sense. But if you go back to the original Yehoshua, the original Joshua in the Old Testament, who did enter the promised land, he marched around and they blew the horns, right? And that was a lot more akin to a cry, to blow horns and send down these supposedly horrible cities of sin. That wasn't saving people, right? That was, blasting God's cry out. Yahweh Yeshua, Yeshua, Joshua, maybe if you would be like the closest way, if you really wanted to condense it and like butcherize it like this, would be Yah saves, right? So he obviously, I think you see my argument there, so I don't want to keep trying to make it all day. That's where I'm coming from with that. And you can even look it up in Strong's, and it even says there, like, okay, let's do, 121. So we come here to Matt 121, Blue Letter Bible, and we can click on the verse, and it will, and he shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. Well, let's click on it, and then we can come down here, and there's the name, right? Jesus. There's the original name in the original King James of how it was written. And then we're going to come in here. This stands for Strong's Greek, number 2424. And we're going to click on that. And Strong's is basically, it tells you exactly what Greek or Hebrew word is underneath that text for the most part. I mean, it's not exactly a one-to-one, but for the most part it is. Okay, so we come down here. It says of Hebrew origin. So we have a Yod, Hey, Wah, Sheen, and then what is that? I can't remember what that one is. What's the one where it goes? See, this is the Chaldean script. This isn't Yod, Hey, Wah. That's another Wah. These little dots are, and it's right to left, obviously. These little dots are like pronunciation marks, like diacritic vowel marks. And then this is an ayin. So you get Yah, Sha, Wah. Roughly, if you try and transliterate that. Jehovah is salvation. All right there. This gives it away. I mean, and this is something where it like looks all obvious, but you got to remember this is all written by modern day man, so human, whatever you want to say. So this This is just them trying to bridge that little gap and like give you that, oh, there it is, the be all end all, but it's not. None of this is the be all end all. It's setting you down a path, and it's up to you to stay on the right path. And that's what the word righteous, if you go back and dig into the meanings under these words, righteous didn't mean you're like such a good, quote unquote, good, morally good person necessarily. Righteous meant you were on the right path. You were walking the right path, literally. Okay, so it says Jehovah is salvation. Well, no, we know this name means, if you actually look it up in Strong's, maybe I can just type Strong's Joshua. Okay, there it is, Yehoshua, right? Oh man, they're saying the Lord is salvation because they're confused. They're assuming if we punch in Yehoshua that we don't mean Joshua, right? And that is spelt the same. That one is the Yehoshua instead of Yasha, which it should be. The Lord is salvation. That's not what it is. I need freaking... Okay, see right here from Yahweh and Yasha. Yahweh, Yod He, Vav He. That Vav is actually, it's a Wah, which is that thing. Sorry, my thing went back to this skinny little piece of junk. Every time I restart Windows, I have to go in here and do this for some reason to get it to like go to the right scheme so that it can see what my stuff is. Okay, so Yod He, Vav He is what that is. And then when you come in here, Yasha, this is going to prove my point where even Strong's almost seems to contradict itself, but it doesn't if you dig into the big book. To deliver, Yasha, which also means to save. And there you see it's a Yod instead of a Wah there. A Yod, Sheen, Ayin, which those are just the names of those glyphs or words or whatever you want to call them, or letters. So it's kind of like how we have the word B makes a B sound, even though we call it a B, right? So, which actually comes from bait in ancient Hebrew. But anyway, you just pronounce the first thing. So you just do the Y for the Yod, and the Sh for the Sheen, and then the Ah for the Ayin. So Yasha. And that's where you get that to deliver. So that's what the name is supposed to be. I have one on the phone that is way better. It's way more to the point than all this crap that these things use where they just beat around the bush and never give you the right answer about it. But trying to do the best I can here. So they're saying that Jesus is of Hebrew origin from this word, H3091, right? So that the H means Hebrew. So basically, for the most part speaking, when you see the H, it means it's the Old Testament word. When you see the G, it means it's New Testament word. So we come in here, Yehoshua. So there's the Yod He is represented by those, and that could be Yaha or however you want to pronounce it. Nobody supposedly knows. It's just say it from your heart or whatever, and say whatever you're going for. And then the Shua that's that Sheen. What is it? A Wah and a Ayin. So how come they don't have Yah's cry in here? That's what's pissing me off. Because that's what it means. It does not mean salvation. You know what I mean? Because we see here the words plainly Shua, not Yasha. And we just saw in that more correct part. So from 3068, if we go here, Yehovah, right? That's the first part of that word. And then what does this one say? 3467, Yasha, right there. So they're saying this root, or I was trying to think of word and root at the same time, but this word, Yahweh Shua, Yehoshua, comes from Yehovah right here, because the V could be pronounced as a B or a W or whatever, or a V. From Yehovah, Yasha. So why do we have Shua there? If it's Yasha, it says it comes from the word Yasha. So that's one of the giveaways right there where it's hidden. Compare these ones. Hosha. salvation. Okay, that's Yeshua right there. Where are they getting this Hosha? This Hosha. For some reason they're pronouncing this yod like ho instead of Yosha. It's weird how much they cover up those. But one of the things too is that when you see this kind of script with these little dots on it and stuff, this was after, I'm not trying to judge anybody or anything, but according to the New Testament, the Bible, it says those who call themselves Jews outwardly, but inwardly they're the synagogue of Satan, right? And my interpretation of this, zero persecution to anybody, is that this was the corruption. When you get this Chaldean script from the Babylonian captivity, and then they started using this more square script, this Aramaic script, and going by these pronunciations that drive us away from the truth. If you ignore those and go by more of your gut instinct from reading and studying, you'll find this truth reveals itself. So I'm trying to find Shua so I can prove that word means cry in here. Maybe, which is just so ridiculous that they don't show you that they're going to deliberately. I mean, anybody who knows Hebrew right now, any of my Jewish friends that know Hebrew right now know what I'm talking about. You're already like, yeah, Shua means cry. You know it, right? Why isn't that in here? Why is that twisted? Okay, there's Joshua, right? Following the manner of Joshua. Said unto, okay, now that the name's written Joshua, right? It's the same name. What are they going to do? Are they going to give it to us? Yehoshua. Oh, I'm so pissed right now. It's not even funny. Okay. Strong's Shua. Stones. Strong's. Shua, right here. Cry for help. There it is. Sheen, Wa, Ayin. Cry for help. Why didn't they give us a connection for that? Do you think that the Savior was a cry for help? No, I don't think so. The Savior was salvation. That's why we call him the Savior. That's why they said, you shall name his name Yeshua, for he shall save his people. Not, you shall name his name God, cry for help, for he shall save his people. That's not what it is. That's Joshua was God's cry for help in the Old Testament. You see what's going on here? Do you see where they cover up these names? Why do you think they replaced the capital name G-O-D, Yahweh is the way I pronounce it. Yahweh, whatever, people say Jehovah. Jehovah to me is just twisted around and saying the name. You're welcome to say it as however you want, right? But if you look at Jehovah, that's the same thing. It's very similar thing as with Jesus, where you have that J-E sound, which wasn't until the last few hundred years in English, which we're not even saying an English name, and then and then they're doing ho, which to me that's a long. These should be short vowels because they're implanted vowels. They don't even exist. You know what I mean? They're like, so I would think like you would be. My personal gut instinct is to say yah. Hey is a breath. Ha, ha. That's how you pronounce an H. Then that's where we get our H from in English too. Ancient Hebrew pictographs. Trip out on this. Aleph Bet. That's A-B. Ah, Bay. And if you look, that looks like a sideways capital G, right? And what's such a trip is even to this day, even English is more related to ancient Hebrew, the language of all ancient civilizations. They'll call it like ancient Phoenician or something if you look in like secular texts. They won't admit it was Hebrew, but it's like, oh, where did this popular trade language Phoenician come from? Well, if you keep digging back, it came from Hebrew. It came from ancient Hebrews, the Hebrews. So we even went back and borrowed the shape of this glyph. We didn't keep the sound or anything, but when we alphabetized our, gave it the capital letters and stuff, there you can see there's a Y, there's a J and an L. You know what I mean? All the M is a waves of water, and it was called MAME, and it had the sound M, and it was waves of water. And look at an M. Does that not look like waves of water? Right here, if you flip this upside down, you have horns of an ox, and then the head, an A. Flip an A upside down and tell me that does not look like an ox head with horns. I'm going to click on Benner's site right there too while I'm at it. So here's Jeff Benner. At first this creeped me out when I first found this site. I'm like, this guy was like, oh man, after I realized what's up with this, I just think this is the coolest little logo. And I was like, whoa, that looks like idolatry, right? And the reason he's saying that is because right here you have the very first letter of the alphabet, the A, and the very last one, this cross, which is a ta, right? I'm the Alpha and the Omega. That's in the Greek. But if you were to go into the Hebrew and say that same phrase, it'd be I am the All and the Ta. I'm the beginning and the end, the first and the last, the All, the Aleph in more of an Arabic pronunciation of it, which that's where that language stems from too. Is that's the ox head, the strength, the leader, and the Ta is the cross, the promise, the covenant. What a trip, right? So you come in here and you look at these. So these are the names of these letters, and there's, you can argue that whatever, they probably, not all of them are probably called exactly that, which is irrelevant for the most part. These are the sounds like the ah and the a. Elohim is actually like Elohim. It's actually pronounced. It's not related to Allah. There's a whole thing I could go off on about that, and maybe I will sometime. Here's the hey, which I was talking about. It's basically a person, and these glyphs aren't quite, some of them like this hey, I don't think that's quite the oldest one, but these ones all look fairly close to being very close to some of the oldest ones. So you have the strength, the leader, and then you got the bet, father, in so many languages. Even in like Cherokee is Ab or Abba, right? Father comes from this, Abba, 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 A-B, right? And if you look, this is the Greek alphabet over here. The sounds of the Greek alphabet, you got alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? Epsilon, of course, it doesn't go perfectly, but just to show like how close it is, that's where that comes from. You know what I mean? And then later in English, of course, we swapped the G out and put it down further, but that was after the Greek. The Greek's just middle of the road. There's that wavy for the M. Look at that, right? The L shape for the lamed, which is a yoke, or more like a staff, with the crooked end on it, like a candy cane for sheep herding. So that's what that is. The Kaf is like an open hand, the palm of a hand. The Yud, this is basically an arm. This is the first of the Yahweh, is the arm. And then the Tet is like a bottom of a basket. Here we go with the Het. This is where we get the sound, the picture, or pictograph, or glyph, or whatever you want to call it for our letter H. It's basically this without the top and the bottom rung. That's where we get our H. And if you cut off these little ends, that's where you get the 8, the hate. And also, whatever, because how we borrowed shapes from sounds that didn't exactly match up, which is such a trip, the confusion of tongues, right? But it's all there. All that evidence is there. Here's where this isn't quite the oldest one, because this Kof should have a line going straight through it horizontally, and it should have a circle, and that represents the sun at evening. And when you think about that word evening, that means even time, eventide, when the sun is even with the horizon line. And this has since been stood up when they started, this one's pulled from a little bit later of an era, obviously here. This guy isn't the most consistent. He has a lot of, he's just one of the best overall resources in my opinion, but he's not real consistent. A lot of people aren't with the Aleph Bet, as you might call it, and that's where we get the term alphabet, right? The Resh, person's head, Sheen, this looks more like a nose, but they're supposed to be sharper in its teeth. That's what they are, the sh. The teeth, there's the taw. This Gaian, that's arguable. That's a little more esoteric. Like, that doesn't really appear that much. In my opinion, that one's almost not worth even mentioning. And a lot of times it's neglected. And when you follow the whole lineage, if you get a chart, find a chart or do your own studies and follow the lineage, all these other ones are just, so dense with their lineage. And then this one just sort of appears and disappears at random along the lineage. It exists in some, it was just added by some cultures, basically, is what it comes down to. Pei is supposed to be a mouth. They have this looking more like a worm or something. It should be more like this eye without the dot in it, a skinny version of that. Sade is like a man on his side or a seed. There's multiple ways to interpret all these. The Zayin is probably a cutting blade. The Wa is a tent peg. Overall, there's multiple meanings. The Dalet is a door for a tent. The Gimel is a foot. This word technically means camel. At some point along the line, it got confused, but that's not. It's a ga. It's a foot, is what that symbol most likely is there. And the Beit is a tent floor plan, basically representing a house or a home. So, I guess I could have come down here to show all this. This is a picture of a head of an ox, the strongest and most versatile animals among the Hebrew livestock. The ox was used to pull carts or plow. It provided meat, leather. It was one of the animals used in sacrifices. This animal was the all powerful and all versatile animal of the Hebrews. I think he's kind of playing on the words there. Maybe he's right. I don't see it quite like that. It was pronounced all. But he's sort of playing off of it like it was the all everything. Maybe that is where we get the word all. It could very well be. I wouldn't be surprised. But until I see it for myself and make those connections and study it through multiple, as trustworthy sources as I can find, then I don't just jump to conclusions on that stuff. I try not to. This letter has an ah sound, but also an e sound, an a sound, as in elk, elephant, both of which are also powerful animals. I think he's probably right on that, but as far as any pronunciation goes, we just don't know. But, for the most part, that is most likely the truth. The name of this letter is Aleph, which may be of origin of elephant, right? So, all elk, elephant, here's the site, ancient-hebrew.org/learn/the-ancient-pictographic-hebrew-script.htm. There's the Beit, the B sound. So these are the symbols that Chaldean script that I said isn't Hebrew. This is real Hebrew right here for the most part. So this is what Hebrew looks like. There's a thorn right there, right? That's the Samek. It's a picture of a thorn which attaches itself to the flesh, causing pain. Though our word sin comes from this letter, right? As a pain in our flesh. So sin doesn't mean to do bad, it means to be inflicted by bad. I mean, there's just a lot of these things are the inverse of what we, in our Greek conceptualized thought that we've come to think. It's very important to come back, and it's just so revealing to look, especially the old words in the Bible, and come back to these meanings around them. And it's a trip. It's a trip how words that we have, even to this day, obviously came from the Bible in ancient times, and they've stuck through, even with the confusion of tongues, there's so much evidence of these words sticking, and you see that their very definitions, and this pictographic language locks that in, because when you see the ayin that is something to do with sight or revelation or something around that, even if it's a little more abstract, like know, because by seeing something, right, or being revealed, so there's some relation to that pictographic symbol. Picture of a trail leading to a destination, such as a watering hole. It's a sade. It could be a man on his side. The older ones, it actually looks more like a seed. It's a picture she even says, this is a picture of the sun at the horizon, which that's not a sun at a horizon. This is actually where you can see our Q came from, though. It's a kof, right? That's what's called kof, sound Q. And then you can imagine, if you line these up, you can see how this went from that sun at the horizon. Later, they started standing up the script to make it more compact, arguably. I think it was also a lot to do with disguising the meaning, maybe subliminally or not. But they started standing the letters up. They could squeeze in more in a line. And so they started out as more top-down and horizontal alignment. And then they switched to right to left with this more vertical alignment. And then, of course, later, once inking became more popular and most people being right-handed, they started going from left to right so that they wouldn't smear the ink. But originally it was hammer and chisel, so it made more sense to hold the chisel or whatever you were using in your left hand while you hammered with your right hand to do that right to left or top down type of writing. Here's resh, it's the R sound, it's the head of a person, which is raised up to look. See right here, it says even these are pictures of two front teeth, the sheen, or the teeth shine. And then the towel, two cross sticks, a mark such as a target one aims at when shooting, a mark, sign, a monument. And then, speaking of the esoteric meaning, right, it's twisted, dark, wicked. So that's really the context that I see that word used most, or that character used most in too. Okay, that's cool. I've never seen this exact page, but of course I've seen tons of stuff that's almost identical to that. Here's tons of other little charts and stuff you can see that kind of like, oh, this looks cool. Zoom that in here. So you can see these kind of confirm. You can see the G, there's the lowercase g. This is all that Aramaic Chaldean square script that just looks nothing like it, right? And then you can see there's the capital Roman style G, and there's that G, right? But we're talking about phonetics here is what they're going across. This H, there's that tent wall, and see now it's laying on its side because it is a tent wall more originally, right? And there you can see the 8 for the hate. The tet for the basket, which is that ta inside of a circle. Here you can see the yod, there's the Y, and it was stood up sometimes, and you can see that our very Y came from that exact shape. The K, you could argue it came from that hand. I'm not going to try and whatever. There's a lot of things that show these things. There's the L. You just flip that around. Of course, it could be the sign, the symbol for a J as well. As you saw probably in that last page I was on, the Lamed in later times, it was more like an L. See how it flipped directions, and then it even got more sharp with the turn instead of having that smooth curve. But anyway, we obviously have both glyphs in our own English language to this day. Here's the MAME, and then they added this little trailing line at some point for some reason. Like some of this stuff's just like it's just the same thing as like stuff in cursive or something, you know, like who knows why they added some of the stuff they did. And there you can see that Sade is that what that is? Oh, that's the nun. Okay, I was confusing the nun, huh? With the Sade. Okay, here's the Sade. Man on his side. Snare. And then this one's sprout or seed is the nun. Okay. And the Samek, that thorn. Which, look what it turned into. This, like, round thing. What's that about? The Ayin, of course, is an eye. Pei, it's that mouth. There's a horizontal mouth I was talking about. There's the sun at the horizon. Much more. For some reason, when they went back, I guess there must have been some point where like some scholar went back and like really made these like nice and square, because that's pretty popular to see these very nicely done ancient Hebrew glyphs. But of course, you can go reference the stones and stuff that they were found in, and you can see they're not quite that perfect, but they're, you know, it's very close. There's the two front teeth. Sometimes they're done like this, more like jagged, pointy teeth. And there's the cross from way back when. So definitely some interesting stuff, and you can come in here and see that, you know, shepherd's staff, to teach, yoke, bind toward, maim is water, chaos, mighty, blood, you know, like a fluid. Things around that. The thorn, grab. Oh, I can't tell what that word is. That hate? Grab, hate, protect, I'm assuming. Eye, watch, no shade. Mouth, blow, scatter, or edge, like the edge of your lips. The edge of an open mouth. man on his side, wait, chase, snare, hunt, and all. When you go back into the Bible and you break apart the language, you see even people's names. You know what I mean? It reveals so much about their names, like Methuselah and stuff like that. Such a trip. And then you can see right here, they're skipping some generations here because this A should be completely upside down is what we think of an A as. And then you can see these would be like the ox horns up here and stuff like that. But this, of course, was way later. This is more like probably around the time of the Savior-ish of the script. And this is the restored Chaldean script, supposedly. Which even that Chaldean script, there's some arguments that it did directly derive from the original. I haven't really dug into that in a while. I mean, the language definitely did, but I think it was very confused by that time. This is a cool chart. I don't know if it's the exact one I'm thinking of, but it's very similar to some of the ones that I have printed. They're pretty handy to go through and just really legibly read. They see the best English translation. Look how many English letters translate over. I mean, of course, the B isn't going to look like the B, but hey, the G does, right? So they might not look the same, but the sound, that individual sound, translates directly over, like so much of the time. Oh, and here, what's this? Okay. And then ancient Hebrew, all. So they're telling you the names of it. And these are the little bit shorter names, probably more accurate. And how they're named, how the name is written. Like the Gom. They're not trying to call it the Gimel, which I think is good. So it's GM, right? That's how you'd spell it. DLHA. Once you go through and do, or they are using the E, but I think of the Hey as more of an H. They're, whatever. This becomes so smooth, and it's so much easier to learn than this Hebrew. Like, my wife and I started to learn this Hebrew, and I was just kind of like, and she kept at it, and she got pretty good with it. But I was just like, oh man, I would not be like sticking with this if it wasn't for her. And they try and argue that this is like based on the ox head. Like, I mean, you could kind of like fill in the blanks, like some constellation, and like make that argument, but then, it's so. And everything I do, I try and relate it back to the ancient Hebrew in a really bad way. Like, oh, okay, here's this. I don't know. It's horrible. And if I go away from it too long, I forget all about it. Like, you have to look at, they have these final, which you just basically, like, you're dropping that line, and you only do it with some of them. Like, there's the Sade, right? And then when you find the ayin, where's the ayin? Right here. And it's like, look at that ayin versus this Sade, and they're like confusingly similar, especially in different fonts and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden you run into this one on a rare occasion, and you're like, oh, what was that? Is that a yod? Like, stuff like that. But basically, the easiest way I think to remember that is that you start memorizing which one are the finals, and it's basically just like this bottom leg just gets dropped straight down. If you look at it on most all of them, that's what the effect is there. And then they put the little dots to tell you whether to pronounce it a buh or a b or whatever. And it's just like, I don't know. If you want to go over to Israel or like communicate with people in that language and what I consider modern Chaldean, then I think it's interesting to learn it in that regard. But otherwise, I just think that that's time and energy that could be spent studying these glyphs and applying them. So anyway, I'm going to try and wrap that part up. Back to this Mesopotamia and Babel. So Babylon, if you look it up, I'm not sure. So Babel, if we look, that's H894, right? It's the same exact word. Like whenever you see Babylon right here, Babel or Babylon, confusion by mixing, right? So that, and it's not Babel. That's what Babel is. Babel in and of itself. It's Babel. That's what the two words are. The house of Bel worship, right? Babel, see it? Babel, right there. And that's where it comes back to those same glyphs, because if you remember that that bait, that second glyph meant the 10th floor plan, the house, right? So house of Bel, right there. You got the bait, LL, Lamed, in the more modern square script. So that's Ba'el or Balal. That's actually Balal right there if I click through on it, H1101. Ba, lol, which I think is about the same thing, right? To mix, confuse, confound, whatever. That's where you can get into child roots, parent roots, whether or not certain glyphs or letters or whatever are doubled up. I'm still studying on that, which is way interesting stuff, but I'm not going to try and get into any interpretation on that right now. Okay, this is the sun wheel, which I just punched in because I guess I'm kind of like loosely following the tabs from this side. So this is Mithraism. If you're not familiar, this guy's wearing the Persian cap here, guy or girl or whatever, and that's kind of the thing, like even with the Statue of Liberty, is it a guy or a girl? Do you know? Slaughtering the bull, slaughtering APs. That Persian hat is key. Coming here, Sol Invictus, sun worship. Sol means sun. Invictus, unconquered, invincible, stuff like that. So there you can see very Statue of Liberty-esque. And I'm not saying, that I'm not about liberty, even though that word, the etymology of that word isn't something that I agree with, but the meaning behind what we think of the abstract concept of liberty and freedom, I am about, and the Bible, even in modern translations, it even uses the word liberty, and I don't think it's referring to the term in the pagan sense, but it's, of course, original people who spoke about it weren't at all, but since it's been translated to English, whatnot, it's basically, there's just so much paganism in our language and stuff. It's crazy, it's crazy. Like my wife and I, we try our best not to even say the days of the week, and that might sound goofy or whatever, but it's like, what's goofy? We're programmed to say these days, like Sunday, you're saying that's the day of the sun. You're saying, and that's where Sunday comes from, is sun worship. It's saying the first day of the week, the primary day of the week, is this, the day of the unconquered sun, Dia Solis. That's what Sunday directly means. And that's one of the things that I'm talking about that you got to wake up about. It is not the Lord's day in the sense that they try and construe it as. In the Bible, it says, look for 2 or more witnesses, 2 or more places where you can find a definition of something. You need that confirmation. If you need confirmation of what I'm saying, you need another witness. You need to pray for that confirmation. You don't believe me just because I'm saying it. Screw that. You need the confirmation like the Bible says. The Bible says that about every verse in and of itself, too. And so if there's one spot that vaguely mentions the Lord's Day and then a group of people that say, oh, that's Sunday, that's not true. The Bible, the Lord's Day is always the last day of the week. I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist per se or anything like that, but I do agree with that interpretation of the Bible, and I'm not persecuting or judging anybody. You do whatever you want, keep whatever day or not that you're doing, right? That's your choice. But that's a very specific thing. And there are those 10 commandments, and a lot of people try and say that those 10 commandments were nailed to that cross. If they were, then they were resurrected 3 days later, right? That's one argument I can make. Another argument I can make is that the Bible specifically says that those 10 commandments would no longer be written on stone, but in hearts. So it's saying, yeah, you're not being held to the letter of the law, but you should be about striving. I think we should be about striving to do good and to do according to those commands. And then the other thing is, what is the other thing about those? I was just thinking. Oh, the other thing is that, people say that. Well, what does that mean? That it's okay to covet your neighbor's wife now? Because those commandments were nailed to the cross and buried, supposedly, and like you're not supposed to follow that legalistic view. So you can just go ahead and you can kill, you can covet people's wives and property and stuff, and like you can do all that stuff now because you're saved by the grace of God now. Like that a guy came and lived a perfect life and suffered so that you could just piss in the wind now. Like, give me a break, right? Oh no, those ones still do stand, right? Like all those commands still, and more technically in the ancient Hebrew, they were directions, they were guidance to stay on the right path, right? And those, why are you going to say that 9 out of 10 still stand, but not the one to keep the Sabbath? keep that cessation, that day of rest, enter into my rest, right? You know what I mean? When Yahweh led the Jews from Egypt, they weren't being given days of rest like they were supposed to. They were slaves. That's one of the defining things between being simply a bondsperson, which you could argue a lot of us are today, paying off debt and whatnot, working very hard to pay off that debt, but we still get our break, right? We still get time to recuperate. That's rest. And we need to give that honor to Yahweh, who has allowed us by putting it in the king's hearts that we could have that rest. You know what I mean? Otherwise, we're back to 10-day weeks and stuff like that, to where you don't get no rest. And once you do, you're out of the game, and you can just go decompose, and the next person will come in and take your spot. Disgusting. Totally disgusting. But that seventh day, and people who want to argue, oh, well, that wasn't even till the time of Moses, so that means that the patriarchs couldn't even have kept it. Really? Because, right in the first verses of Genesis, did it not say that God rested on the seventh day? You know what I mean? Interpret it how you want, but that's pretty much establishing that there was that there. And was murder not bad before the Ten Commandments? You know what I mean? Were these things not bad or good? The thing is that by Moses' time, people had strayed so far that they needed these things written in stone. You know what I mean? Even when he went up on the hill to get them written in stone and came down, supposedly, the people had already melted all their jewelry and made a golden calf. Like, that's how bad it was. They were carrying around the talisman of Saturn and stuff like that. So it's like, these people were just very universal religion. They weren't all about just dedicating themselves to Yahweh, what we believe is the one true God. That they weren't about that. They were about this universalizing and just like, oh, well, we'll go over to this place and take up these gods too, and just, mix the cultures and everybody get along, which it's cool to get along with people, but we need to not take on their practices in doing so. You know what I mean? There's a difference between tolerating different cultures and celebrating them and bringing them in to within your temple, and we need to avoid that. We need to say, hey, there's a threshold here. Like, yeah, we're not going to kill you for your religion or hate you or deny you a job or let you starve or do anything like that. Ideally, I would think that's the way I look at things. But at the same time, don't expect us to practice your stuff, And that's where stuff's going to get crazy here pretty soon, is they're going to start expecting us to practice their stuff. Watch out for Sunday laws. A lot of you are Sunday churchgoers, and you need to realize that is not the Lord's day. I'm sorry. I'm here to reveal this to you. You know what I mean? I'm not persecuting you. You'll find that out, God willing, in your own time. And I'm not saying you need to go back to some hardcore Levitical law of Judaism either. There's this happy medium there, that as you, on your walk down what should be a path of righteousness, discover and pray for and read, literally read, search the King James Bible even. None of these English translations are the be-all, end-all. You've got to dig. You know what I mean? The King James Bible is heavily corrupted. I would say for the most part, it's very, very trustworthy and truthworthy and stuff. But there is no perfect translation of the Bible left. If there is, it's hidden from everybody. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's our job. You think you have everlasting life in the scriptures? Well, you better search them daily, right? Isn't that not what the Savior, Yahweh Yeshua, said? He said, search those scriptures daily. You need to be, not just you. When I say you, I mean me too. We need to be just so thorough with our research. It's not about go and let some preacher, some dude stand at a podium, you know what I mean, and tell us this stuff. I'm not saying don't go to church. If you like your church, you can continue to go there, of course, like that's your thing, right? But you got to be very, very careful. As soon as that silver spoon comes out and starts feeding us, you got to be careful, and you got to question stuff, and you bring in the whole social dances around these kinds of things, and like, oh, why weren't you at church? And church is on Sunday, and why didn't you have group prayer and let somebody else move your mouth like a puppet to what you're going to say to God, and you're going to bow your head before this other person that's speaking as an intermediary between you and God? I don't see that in the Bible anywhere. It says in the Matthew, it says you go into a closet to pray, and therefore what you pray in secret you will be openly rewarded for, right? That's what it says. And the only time there was group prayer with one accord kind of a thing is in Acts, when everybody is getting together on a very emotional level, when everybody truly does have a very similar prayer to say. Not like, oh, here's this guy that, you have no idea what he's going to say, but bow your head. Bow your head, it's Sunday, bow your head and let him talk for you. No, there's nothing in the Bible like that whatsoever. That is a practice from this tradition I'm revealing to you right here. That's where this man on a soapbox kind of thing comes from more. I mean, not to say that that doesn't somewhat have a place in biblical tradition, but it, even the word Christianity is a trippy word to use once you really get into the etymology of things. I know that most people in their heart, they don't think of it as its true roots, but a Christ, like I said, Jesus Christ, I think we should just give it a little bit more effort than the first thing we're spoon-fed as far as these names go. Not that we need to get like wicked crazy on stuff, but we really should put in that effort. Take everything one step further. You know what I mean? When a preacher does true expository on the Bible verses, they go in and they dig in and they go, well, what did this word mean in that time? What was this word translated from? What did this word look like spelt out? Who else was using this word? My wife and I took an online seminary class, and we're really good seminary dude too, whoever was teaching that course. If you go to Dallas, Texas Seminary or Dallas Seminary School or something, they have a bunch of free online courses. Go back to the old ones. I don't agree with anybody completely on any of this stuff, but there's one of those guys, and he sort of leans to the Sunday da-da-da kind of stuff or whatever, but you go in and there's little gems to cherry pick out of there, right? And this guy, the way he was talking about like really grinding down, I love that that academic approach to the Bible. There's nothing. The Bible doesn't defy science or academics or any of that, and a lot of that comes from preaching, whether it was biblical or otherwise. But just the whole idea of like rhetorical analysis, all that kind of stuff, just like totally the whole collegiate thing. If you take, separate out the so-called liberal arts or whatever, agenda, political agenda that you might think of when you think of college and stuff, and think about the real academic value of it, that totally coincides biblically. And that's the way I look at the Bible. That I dig into it, we dig into it on that kind of a level, and there is zero contradiction. All that does is reveal so much, and it just goes to show, it makes these people look, and I mean this in the most loving and kind way, but it makes a lot of people look stupid that are looking at us like we're stupid, like, oh, you believe that crap? You believe that fantasy? Just instantly written off. But then they'll turn around and give all due respect to somebody who's, part of Islam or something. And it's like, oh, really? So you're allowed to persecute people based on their religion if it's one particular religion, but you pick and choose, but only these people are idiots. The other people, you got to be politically correct, and you're not going to say anything bad about them, and you're going to lift them up. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. For one thing, that's what I see a lot of, and I just picked out, one religion or whatever, but it's with all of them. And the other thing is, you get so much revelation. I've had people tell me that, just accuse me of things, of being whatever, and it's like, whoa, you're like, even in the sense of somebody arguing one time that like, oh, this doesn't allow for Platonic discussion, and it's like, oh, really? Well, you need to go back and study Plato, homie. Because like, you don't even know, like, Plato is what a lot of like religious, especially the whatever wacky spiritualized stuff, stands upon Platonic ideals. Like, that's where that comes from. So people have these just like such generic notions that are implanted in their head in like 4th grade by like their grandparents talking and watching Jeopardy or something. I don't know. We get all these ideas implanted in our head, and they don't even mean what we think they do. I mean, you could use them in that loose, dumb sense and whatever, but it's crazy. And it's like, but thank God I know these things. Like, I don't know everything. I'm not trying to act like, oh, I'm all high and mighty, God teaches me everything, everybody else is idiots. I'm not trying to act like that in the least. I think I'm mostly a freaking idiot for sure, and I'm mostly disgusting. Like, that's where I stand on things. But I'm always trying, and I'm a lot of times, the more I try, the more revelation, the more I put my heart out there, the more revelations I receive, to where it's like, and that's the thing too, is Yahweh and Yahweh Yeshua reveals so much to me, I feel like, to where it's like, I can sit there and just study and be like, no, I'm just going to study this academic mindset, whatever. I'm just going to study. And that's, A to B, B to C, that kind of a thing. But then if I kick back and put my heart out there and give my love and receive that love, then those revelations straight get downloaded. And it's like, whoa, this is like, this is what I was wanting. I was trying to achieve it by my own works. But what I need to do is the works of God. You know what I mean? When you do, because that's one thing people confuse with like Paul too, that like a lot of, even if people that will actually discuss real Bible verses in church and, not just hang on to one line and spin it into the modern news or whatever they do with it. But, if they actually dig one layer deeper, they'll usually stop with Paul. And, Paul's intense, and I'm not trying to say that I don't like Paul or Paul's the be all end all or any of that. I think he was the last disciple for sure. I don't think they were supposed to cast lots for that last disciple. I think it was Paul, to replace Judas Iscariot. But you can see Paul uses the term works in two different contexts, and a lot of people that I've seen that go off of like, oh well, you're saved by faith and faith alone, and once saved always saved and all that, and it's like, well, that contradicts even Paul himself. It contradicts the book of James, which if you haven't read the Bible literally in a while, I would suggest pick up New Testament the book of James. Very short read, I think 5 chapters, even that, and it just really, and some people try and argue, oh, that was really an Old Testament one, and they just add in the Savior's name a few times and try and pull it, because one of the cool things is that it really like encapsulates so much about the Old and the New Testament and stuff like that. So it's just a really good like pick it up and get pointed in the right direction with things, and that whole thing, bridling your tongue, something that I need to do a lot better. But anyway, Paul talks about works in two different contexts, and one of the contexts is the works ourselves, like I was referring to of me just going out, to push it to an extreme would be like, oh, I went and fixed my truck today or something, so that was a good deed. Like that'd be a really pathetic example, right? But what if you just went and fixed your neighbor's truck for them? Well, that's a good deed. That works, but that's works by your hand. And did you say, when that person thanked you, did you say, hey, all glory to Yahweh and Yahweh Yeshua, I take none of that glory, that's who made this possible. Then you didn't give all glory to God, right? So, I mean, however you want to say it or whatever, but that's the thing, and I'm guilty of that more times than not, than I would say, even when I know it, and I'm just like, well, I sees a homeless person walking down the street and give them a bunch of cans and bottles or whatever. I don't really have a lot of cans. I think we're stupid. We're stupid as the Romans with lead pipes, drinking out of aluminum. That's what I think. So we try to minimize our aluminum usage. But I'm probably far too late on that for us. But anyway, especially for me. But so we mostly have like glass and plastic. But anyway, if I give somebody those cans and bottles and I don't say, hey, all glory to God, then I might as well just go on and burn them in a fire. I almost said bonfire. Look up that word bonfire. Where that really comes from. Well, there's so much paganism that you don't even know. This is where the 4th of July comes from, right? The summer solstice. Bonfire. Who's Bon? Because that's who this fire's to. Bonfire, large but controlled outdoor fire used either for informal disposable or burnable waste material as part of a celebration. That's about as far as most of our knowledge would go on it, right? I'd say. Let's see what Wikipedia will reveal to us here. Regional traditions. Uh-oh, we got stuff to do with the night before Estros, celebration of the, whenever we even say East, we're referring to the goddess of the east wind. Easter has nothing to do with the Bible. It was mistranslated in there once so that they could use it and act like it was part of the Bible, but it really was written, it overwrote the word Pesach, which means Passover. Let's say, Acts, Easter. And so that's Acts 12:4, right? So we'll go BLB Acts 12. And here you can see well they use the word Easter. I'm crazy, right? It's used in the Bible. And if you search the whole Bible, I mean, in some newer Bibles, they might have overwritten it even more times than that, but this is the one time in the traditional King James Version that they overwrote the word Passover with Easter in the New Testament. And if you want to know how to hold a church, this book right here will tell you. This is where the bridge between the original disciples and Paul. This is, the time after the resurrection, all that stuff. This is the kernel center point of the New Testament. And when he had apprehended him, he put, a lot of times I like to read without these italicized words because they were added, but they're not consistently added or removed. But if you do that in the Old Testament, it sort of reveals a little bit of an older tongue, which is nice. But he put him in prison and delivered him to the 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep, which I imagine is kind of like a legion or something, maybe smaller, to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people. So Easter could almost make sense in this context because they're actually sounds like they're referring to the Romans. So they might have referred to it as Easter. I guess you could make literally playing the devil's advocate there, right? But let's look at what did the disciples write when they wrote this book of the Gospels? Or I guess a lot of people don't call that the Gospels, right? But whatever it is, it's written by Luke, I believe. Is Acts written by Luke, most likely? Yeah. Okay, so where is that word Easter? Greek 3957 Pascha. That's the Greek way of saying Pesach. So Pascha, of Aramaic origin, Pei, Samek. What is that last glyph there? Is that Tet? Can't remember. The Paschal sacrifice there it said Passover right here. The following manner translates Passover. The KJV translates Strong's Greek letter 3957, so Greek means New Testament, right? In the following manner, Passover 28 times and Easter once. It translated Easter that one time I showed you. Otherwise, they always write Passover there. So if you don't want to feel like you got to throw out your text or something that it's mistranslated too bad, you could think that that's referring to the term in the Roman sense. It's not referring to it in the biblical sense, right? So, and plus the two celebrations are actually different. They happen to be close. They're both in spring, but they're different timings and stuff. And what do? They do Easter Sunday. They try and bind it back to a Sunday. The Bible's not about that. The Bible is about moons, moon timings, months. The word month comes from the word moon or mon, and mon means man. So that's the man in the moon thing you hear. They think that there's like Mother Earth, Father Moon, some religions, that's not biblical, but that's what they think, and that's where that term comes from, of referring to the moon as the man, so just loosely speaking. But that's also where more, in context of what I'm talking about, that's where we get the word month. It's the moon takes an average of 29 and a half days to go through its cycles. So if we go moon cycles, you will see, here's the phases of the moon, right? So it starts out, it will be black, the so-called new moon, and then there'll be even a small, this is actually like 5 days in or 7 days in or so, but you'll start getting this crescent on the right-hand side, and then, eventually halfway through the month, not our Gregorian calendar month, because that's like more arbitrary, right? That's more of like a solar calendar where it's like, okay, this will roughly line up with the year, and we'll have the leap year where we skip a day or whatever, to try and keep things on track. But this is the lunar, which even lunar comes from a pagan name, right? Luna, all that junk. But this is that, how that's, it's hard to talk without using pagan terms. It's crazy. But this is halfway through the month. This is like 3/4 way through the month, roughly. This is, oh, I always get this wrong when I describe this. It's not halfway through the month. This is halfway through the month. The full moon, right? This is 1/4 of the way through the month. And then you come back around and this is the very end of the month. So when you look up into the sky, sometimes it will line up. Like every so many years it will line up, and most the months of the year will actually line up with the moon, but it's a little bit off, like the blinkers of everybody at the stoplight, because we're not really looking for that sliver to start the new month and all that kind of cool stuff. But this is what we're supposed to, one of the things we're supposed to use to determine months and things like that. And timings, you know, it says right in Genesis to look to the stars in English, you know, like the bodies in heaven, to see for signs and times and things like that. So that's what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to have Passover specifically on the first day of the week, which is really weird too, is because the pagan groups that back like the globalism and the United Nations and all that kind of stuff, they consider the Sunday to be the first day of the week, which coincidentally, even biblically speaking, that day that they call Sunday, even biblically speaking, that is the first day of the week. Like that agrees with the Bible, not the name, but the day. But then on their international week count, they've now started the days, the ISO calendar, or the ISO weekdays, right? They counted on starting on the second day, on that moon day, Monday, right? Which is weird, but of course their religion, I mean, technically it's satanic, which means accuser. And of course, I seem more like an accuser by saying that, right? But I'm not trying to accuse, I'm just trying to reveal. I would rather be known as a revealer. But, and they're considered accusers in the grand sense, or, you know, the thing is that their person who they give credit to as the grand architect of the universe is the accuser, the one who accuses us all of our wrongdoings before Yahweh. And we are all found wanting on that scale, and that's why he's there to be the first one to do that. But we have a Redeemer who comes in and washes us with his blood so that we can be robed in white and stand unaccused, unsatanically there. And so if you look up the word Satan or devil, those words both, in a very literal sense, mean accuser. So that's what that comes from. All right, where am I with this stuff? What word are we here? There's Chaldean. It even says, that's cool, Chaldean. Yeah, so Pesach means Passover. I think I made that clear. Bonfire. Let's see, I don't want to get too off. Is this just Bon by itself? Doesn't look like this one has. Maybe Bonfire Night. Bonfire Night, look at that big old thing. Guy Fawkes Night, right? Oh, maybe if we just type in Bon, it will tell us. See, sometimes these links are missing in here. That's one thing you got to realize, especially the modern way. Okay, now we're starting. What does that symbol look like? Look at that symbol right there. Tell me what that is. Give me a break. Young Drung is a left-facing swastika, a sacred symbol of Bon religion. The swastika comes from sun worship, which is something I have open over here. If I just type in, earlier when I typed in sun wheel without the space, and go to the first page here, oh, it's kind of changed it a little bit. What does that kind of look like? Like, look at that. What does that resemble? I'm going to go dig into the images. It's weird how the stuff will change so quick. Okay, right here, like, okay, that's not it. This one, right there. What does that look like? I mean, give me a break. You can see, it's totally, what does that look like? There's a flaming sun around it. That is where these people got their sun wheel. You know what I mean? It depends on if it's right or left facing. That's the yin and the yang, the black and the white, the dark and the bright, the good and the bad, supposedly. That's sun worship. That's where that comes from. There's tons of variations on it. That's why I had it as sun wheel, space sun wheel. We can go over to the sun cross on the Wikipedia page. You could even see it in that spoked rim back there, like right here. Polaris, right? Okay. Come in here. And like I said, these aren't the be-all, end-all meanings for this, but it's funneling towards it. You know, there's several meanings at least behind every symbol you'll see. The peace sign, not what you think. You know, and the most played down, simplistic versions of them are usually the most recent, where they're like, oh yeah, that just means peace, or Spock's little sign of the hand signal, that just means, you know, live long and prosper. That's all that means, right? You're being fooled. You're being deceived. What's this look like? Does that look like a radioactive symbol to you? All that stuff comes from stuff. The peace symbol, all of it. It all has old school esoteric meanings behind it, you know? It wasn't just invented because it was symmetrical. Here's the more sun wheels. Look at that sun wheel back there in the background, right? The sun wheel is a sign of sun worship. This is where the halo that you see over people's heads comes from. All that is not biblical. To see halos above people's heads, even in the imagery of that white little skinny Christ figure, that was put there by sun worshippers, you know. And here we come back to here. What do we have here? We have these rays, these spokes of the sun. This is a representation of Sol Invictus right here in the Mithraic context of, you know, Mithraic is one of the oldest cults, Mesopotamian religions there is. So here we go, that Sol Invictus thing, you know, that looks very much like the Statue of Liberty. That's what it was heavily derived from. What does that look like? It looks like the Statue of Liberty. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. A lot of these are 11. There's 12 in the so-called Queen of Heaven. There's a lot of overlap here with this stuff. So anyway, I'm not pointing this out to judge people. I'm pointing it out to show that this is ancient Greco-Roman religion, and even further back than that. But I'm only bringing it back to the ancient Greco-Roman religion. Here's Sol Roman mythology, right? So Sol is sun, the personification of the sun in ancient, which the sun they say is like an eye of their god. That's one of those like all-seeing eye kind of eyes. Like in the Egyptian religion, they would say that the Ra, right, which I think might have been where the word Ray comes from, is Ra's eye is that sun, and then the moon is Horus's eye, and they're kind of like synonymous with each other. So Sol Invictus, perhaps under the influence of Mithraic mysteries. There you go. The person in the Persian cap, the Mithras slaying the bull Apis. Look at the horns on this bull. See that? That's going to be important here in a minute. I'm just showing you this ancient sun worship that's been back there since the beginning of time, practically the beginning of time as we know it. Here we are again. You've got the Mithraic, the bull, the Sol Invictus like figure right here. And they used to worship, and probably still do, but in tombs, in underground tombs, was their little gathering place. And they're big on that. And we know that a lot of people that, you know, they think they go to these Ivy League colleges and stuff and join up with their fraternal organizations and all of that stuff. And what do you do? What do a lot of the people do on that? Give me a break. You go into tombs and you go practice all these freaking ceremonies. You know what I mean? And you think it's all just fun and games, like Halloween, All Hallows Eve. All Hallows Eve is the worship of the dead. Be so thankful they don't want you to celebrate Halloween or Christmas or any of that crap this year, because I'm sorry to say it's crap. You know, in my opinion, I'm not judging people who do it, but from my perspective, the way I look at that stuff, and not the people, but the practice, it's crap. You know, here's Jeremiah 10. This is the only thing that references the so-called Christ Mass, which was brought to you by the Universal state church, where that's where I say where even that word Christ is not whatever, hear ye which word which Yahweh, that's been replaced. I'm going to show you all capitals, right? Big warning sign, come in here. Lord is Baal. If this was Lord, this should be Baal, but we know, if we're like scholarly with the Bible, Baal, whoa, that's a bad name, right, in the Bible? Well, that word in Hebrew literally just means Lord. So if you're just saying Lord, it's like, which Lord are you talking about? Because in Hebrew, the word Lord, if you just say it by itself, refers to the Dark Lord more often than not. So they replaced Yahweh, Yah-ha-wah-ha, Yod, hey, Wah, hey, right there. They've replaced that with this Jehovah, or Jehovah, like I was saying, and they've replaced that with Lord. So watch out there. I just want to point that out while it's right there. Hear ye the word which Yahweh speaketh unto you, O house of Yisrael. That's another thing. We say Israel. It's Yis. There's a yod there too. Yisrael. And Ra, Yisrael. There's L at the end. That means God right there, right? So you can break apart those words in that way. I was saying, like, that means Yisrael ends with that all there, and you know what I mean, it would be like an all lamed, but that's what it signifies. And you can go in and break down these words, and they will reveal it all to you. Thus saith Yahweh, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed by the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. Well, what are the heathen? The heathen are Germanic people. It's the Nordic religion. You know what I mean? The heathen's not just like some random derogatory term or something. Let's go in here and middle click this, open it in a new tab right here. Shamayim, from an unused word meaning to be lofty. Heavens, the sky. Did I click on the wrong word? Of the heaven, not the heathen. Of the Goi. Apparently from the same root as this word. Nation, people. Okay, so this would be the Goyim. This is the Gentile, the nations. So that's not heathen specifically, but the heathen were part of the Goyim. They were part of the nations. So the way the Old Testament works in the idiomatic Hebrew is that when you hear nation singular, that's referring to the nation of Israel, right? The people of Yahweh. When you hear nations plural, that in context means the other nations of the world. So here we have, what is this? This is where it's from. The back, behind. Okay, well, while we're on it, I'll just say, I'll look up the real heathen, because it actually is a heathen Germanic practice. That may have been why it was later translated like that. Huh. But look at what we've come to in the world. I mean, I love David Bowie. Honestly, I just love his music. I'm not saying that it's like not satanic or is satanic or anything like that, but I just want to put it out there that, like, in a very fleshly perspective, I am a huge David Bowie fan, okay? Like, but what is it that, like, we look up these terms and this is what comes to, these are the popular results that come to the surface here. Where's the disambiguation? Heathen. New religious movement, heathenry? That's the thing with the neo-paganism, is it's like loose-knit versions of these. Heathen, another name for pagan. Well, that's not as good enough. Adherent of heathenry, here we go. This is what we want to dig into, is actual heathenry. They've generalized these terms to just mean like, oh, they're nothing, that just means pagan, or that just means of the nations. Neo-pagan, there you go, right? But here it is, more specifically, Germanic paganism. And Germanic, yeah, Germany, Nordic, the North European religions, that's where this stuff comes from, and I'm not trying to discriminate against people or anything. I'm pointing this out. This is your religion, you're proud, right? That's your choice. I have my choices. I'm exposing this as Christmas is a heathen practice. So to the heathens, that's probably considered a positive good thing to them, to the people who are of the flesh of this world. There's a lot of like celebrations that go around this, but ultimately, according to the Bible, this is a satanic practice. Period. End of story. It's about, and it all boils down to sun worship. That's one of the things I'm showing you. It's the rebirth of the sun. That is the winter solstice, when the sun is at its lowest point, right? The death of the sun god, and then the sun god is resurrected because the days go from their shortest point around December 25th. That's the Gregorian calendar. But why do you think there's 12 days of Christmas? You know what I mean? It's because it goes all the way from the late December into early January, that it could be any of those times. And if you go across a lot of cultures, they all celebrate something, some type of, on all those days, they make sure that some nation, or nations plural, are having a big, huge, one of their biggest celebrations of the year on all those days, so that it's made sure that a huge amount of people are doing this pagan practice, whether or not they consider it pagan or not. And a lot of people are like, oh, it doesn't even have a religious connotation anymore anyway, it's just about fun. It's like, no, it does have a religious connotation. And once again, where these people try and point fingers back at like, oh, it was the Bible reason for the season. Absolutely not. The Bible, from the end of, from fall through spring, this is the nighttime of biblical celebrations. We're all asleep as far as celebrations. There are no celebrations, biblically speaking, across this time period. None whatsoever. So these are all the midnight witching hours of the year. If you think of the year as a day, these are the midnight witching hour celebrations. Christmas and New Year's are basically the celebration of the same exact thing. When you boil it down, they're the same exact thing. We just happen to have kept both of them for various reasons in the modern Roman culture. But anyway, this is what it is, right? I don't want to dig into it too much. It's the winter solstice, the summer solstice. That's where you have Juneteenth, 4th of July, things like that. They try and act like, oh, it's about freedom, 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 right? Juneteenth, what was that about? Freedom. What's 4th of July about? Freedom. No, it's not. I'm sorry. Look into it. It's ancient Roman religion. I'm not trying, like I said, I'm a fan of freedom. I'm not a fan of slavery for any race or culture whatsoever. Not a fan of it. I'm happy that the black people were freed, but the thing is, they try and attach that to the Romanism. You know what I mean? They try and say, oh, Juneteenth, like, oh, 4th of July. No, that's summer solstice. Look it up. That's all within the summer solstice window. And it's been going, that's where bonfires, all that celebration, all that's celebrating Bon with that swastika you just saw. That's what it comes from. And you might want to try and play it down now, and it's like, no, what, I get rid of that tab already? Am I going the wrong direction through here? I must have already closed out that tab, but you saw it. You know what I mean? You saw that stuff. What do we got open here? There's a sun wheel. I think you know where this is. This is the Vatican, okay? There's an obelisk right here in the middle of this area. This is totally pagan. I'm not trying to persecute or discriminate. I'm pointing out and revealing the facts. If you consider yourself a Catholic, you are going against the Bible. You are considering yourself to be something that is anti-biblical, that places this church, that uses this big sun wheel right here with, in its consecrated circle. It's very witchcrafty with their obelisk, and this is one of the primary obelisks. This is like the most central, powerful, supposedly obelisk, which is that big, it's a phallic. It's a male penis sticking out of the ground, is what that represents. And what do? They go and put a grove around it, right? They put a grove of trees around it, which a wreath of trees, which represents a vagina. You know what I mean? It's pagan. It's all pagan. And that's what they do there all the time. They've been doing that. You know what I mean? They can do that. That's freedom of religion. Have fun. You know what I mean? That's their religion. I'm not trying to persecute on that. But what I am pointing out is that these people who have been fooled and bamboozled and think that that's okay for them to go practice that and call themselves a Bible believer and say that they pick God, what God are you putting, what God are you putting above everything if you do that? There's nothing that says that it's okay that you can so-called quote-unquote Christianize those practices. That's where that word's scary, because yeah, you can literally Christianize those practices, but his name wasn't Jesus Christ. So you better watch out where these names are leading you into deception. What did the Savior say? What did the Savior say? Be not deceived. Spelt that wrong. I before E except after C. I'm wording it wrong. Parentheses. It was about end times. These see that you are not deceived. Come on, give me a Bible verse. Matthew 24:24, for false Christs, which should be false messiahs, if you look into this. This is why I prefer Blue Letter, but stupid DuckDuckGo doesn't automatically go to Blue Letter. You've got to manually do that BLB thing like that, and then say Matt 24:24. But even Blue Letter Bible has its flaws, but overall it's one of the better ones. So false Christ, right? How much you want to bet that word says Messiah there? And it might not show it on this even, because Strong's is corrupted in this regard a lot, but pseudo Christos. That's interesting. Pseudo Christos is literally what's supposedly written there. But what they did was they a false Christ or Messiah, right? And what they claim is like, oh well, they use the word Christ for Messiah. Well, you can, and that is true probably most of the time in the New Testament, is that you will see the word Christ, and the underlying Greek will supposedly say, you know, Christos there. But if you look, it's like, oh really? You didn't have a Greek word for Messiah? Lie. Messias. Messias. Definition. Maybe I should punch in like Strong's. Strong's Greek, Messias. Really? Yeah, they created this word in, you know, about 300 BC when they were creating the Septuagint, where they were creating the Greek translation of the Old Testament, plus or minus 300 years before the so-called Christ, the real Messiah, right? And they created this word Messias. So they had it. Why wasn't it used very much? That's what's trippy. You know what I mean? All this stuff is changed and twisted around towards like, oh, let's put Christos there. Well, Christos is an interpreter of an oracle. You know what I mean? So they'll use words like oracle. That's all ancient Greek pagan religion. Oracles and Christs and all that. Like, you got to watch out. Messias is just like a lot of those names, you know, that you see with the IAS instead of like the ya at the end or whatever. Messiah. So that is the Greek way. This would have been the more appropriate way if it was written in Greek to write that stuff. I just want to point that out. I think it's so important. So for false messiahs and false prophets will arise and will show great signs. And messiahs can also mean king. It does mean king, like in the most literal basic sense, I think. Will arise and show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. So this is even yet to come, right? But this deception that you're seeing, you're just seeing the very tip of the iceberg of the deception that's coming right now. Like, this seems big. It's only going to get worse. I'm sorry to tell you, but hey, at least it's more and more, the worse it gets, the more confirmation it is the Bible's absolutely true. Why do you think they don't want you to go to church? And if you are going to insist on going to church, they want you to do it online in the quote-unquote World Wide Web. What's a web? A web's where living things get caught so spiders can come eat them, right? They want you to get caught in this web so that they can catch you and they can come and bind you up. And you know what I mean? That's where your 10 days of persecution and beheading and all that comes from. And those are the times we're getting ready to enter into. I don't know at what pace, but that's what's coming. This will make the last Holocaust look not as intense. Not that it wasn't. I mean, that is horror, right? But what is coming is going to be on a global scale, and it is going to make all other Holocausts pale in comparison. And the primary people they are going to go after is the people who believe the Bible. The Protestants will outnumber other religions by 2050. So they want to get rid of us by 2050. Do you understand that? That is the thing. If they wait till after that, we'll outnumber them. You know, and we're Protestants. We're not Protestants. That's another one of those slippings of the tongue. Protestant. No, Protestant. We're protesting the authoritarian rule of the universal church in the dark age that killed people for reading the Bible. We are protesting that, and we are still protesting that. Yeah, we will unify and we're willing to be in unity with the world on a peaceful level of saying, hey, you can be my neighbor and all that. That's great. You know, the internet provides that, right? I can hop on and talk to somebody in India right now that I don't even know if I want. That's cool. Even though we share conflicting religious values probably, but that's fine. We can do that. But there's not going to be this unity where it's a unified religion that you're going to force us into towards like, oh, we've got to bow at these times and do all this stuff. All this masking and covering the face, very Sharia law like. Defund, you know, and I'm not trying to accuse anybody of doing that, but I'm saying it's very akin to that. That's the closest thing I know of with my shallow knowledge. You know, defunding the police. Like, if you did take an instance where you could say, hey, what is this? Could this be Sharia law creeping in? You're going to have some kind of a police force. So what do you want, a privatized police force that's not homogenous across a nation? You want to bring in privatized police so that this group can set up the Sharia law in this district, and this group can set up this rent-a-cop situation in this district and all that stuff. And that just allows this bleeding in of these types of things potentially. And we know that, you know, I'm not trying to accuse everybody of whatever, but I'm saying that we know there are at least a few, if not more, people and groups and power and stuff that want to bring this in. And one of the arguments I've heard is that, you know, if like these Islamic groups, if they are so peaceful and open and all that kind of stuff, then why don't they allow other religions in their nation? People are killed and beaten in the streets for not following their one national religion, you know? And then you go to China, and from what I understand, I could be completely wrong, it's very similar. You're expected to follow the state religion. And so what they're wanting to do is unify this to where under every nation they're going to try and get a state religion, and then they want to bridge that into a global religion is what they're going to do. And they're going to reveal what we as Bible believers believe will be that pseudo-Christos, right? That false Messiah, that pseudo-Messias. And they're going to reveal that. And our Bible tells us that that's not it. Our King already came, and he will come again. But between now and then, there will be these false messiahs. And this one that will rise, that will sit in the third temple, which is on its way to being rebuilt as we speak. They have what they think. I haven't followed it up in a couple months now, but look up the red heifer in Jerusalem. They're looking for that perfect red heifer that has not one white hair on its entire body. And if they do that, they can burn that heifer, and they can add as much wood as they want and create as much ash in that fire. And then they can take, and all they need is a little sprinkle of that, and they can purify everybody according to the old Levitical law. And they can they have to do that to supposedly purify people so that they can enter this temple. But without that perfect red heifer, they can't do that. So we better pray to Yahweh on that, about, you know, that however long he wants to let us, however much grace he wants to give before that happens. Because as soon as they have that red heifer, bam, they're building that temple, okay? Somewhere probably really near to that, what do you call those? That Muslim mosque in Jerusalem, which it always sticks out because it's got that gold top, that gold dome on it, which the dome is, okay, I'll just shut up for now. But that thing always sticks out, and they act like that's a centerpiece of Jerusalem, and it has nothing to do with the history of Jerusalem. That was put there on the Muslim takeover of that area, they went and built that mosque. That, to my knowledge, isn't even that highly regarded of a mosque at all. Like, but anyway, my knowledge is shallow. Like I said, I'm always trying to learn, and I'm not trying to hate on anybody. You know, I can only pray that people will hopefully see what is right. But the Spirit explicitly says in later times that some will fall away from the faith, paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons. 2 Timothy, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled. What does that sound like? You know, you don't want to hear, like, I'm just, you know, of course, trying to stretch the context of what I'm talking about. You don't want to hear the real name of God, right? Everybody will come to hate that name. Well, what do you think when I say, don't call him Jesus, call him Yahweh Yeshua, if I say it like that, right? Does that tickle your ears? Probably not. Probably not if you're used to saying Jesus, right? You hear Jesus and you're like, Jesus, and that tickles your ears. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Yahweh Yeshua tickles my ears now. So I'm used to saying it like that. Jesus doesn't. But it was a change. You know, there's a change there. You get so used to these things. I've seen atheists stand up and defend the name of Jesus, which is such a trip. They'll be like, oh, that's a misrepresentation, you know, and they'll get up and they'll say, that's not what Jesus was about. It's like full on, like hardcore atheists. And it's like, wow. And they'll be sitting there telling people what name they can use and how they use it and all this stuff. It's like, oh man, what a trip life is. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but wanting to have their ears tickled, they will accumulate for themselves teachers in accordance to their own desires, and will turn away their ears from the truth, and will turn aside to myths. Where do you think the word myths come from? Do you think that word might... Think about etymologies. If you're not into etymologies, get into them now, because they will reveal so much to you. That's where words come from. You know what I mean? One good resource, at least for the time being, who knows how long it will last, is Wiktionary. Wiktionary, the word myth. We can just look it up. Come in here, myth. And then you can see, very good source for etymologies. From ancient Greek, muthos, word, humor, companion, speech, ancient rumor, fable, attested in English since 1830, doublet of mythos. Doublets are, you can use one word in replacement of the other. Doublet of myth. Myth from ancient Greek, muthos, report, tale, story. And so that's just, you know, the middle of the road etymology there. You'd really have to dig back from ancient Greek. It probably comes from Mithraism, I'm guessing. Myth, Mithraic, you know what I mean? Like, did they even mention down here mythical, stuff like that? So that's just to let you know. It's like, oh, that's just a myth. Don't worry about it. Nobody believes that stuff. It's just a myth. They can't even prove that Mithraism, I mean, you can prove it by all these artifacts that you find that exist and stuff. Here's Marduk. This is Mesopotamian. Here you see a sun symbol. You see planets. You see those wings. Remember those wings that I was telling you about? That I said, remember these wings? Okay, are you starting to see it now? Honestly, are you starting to see it? The wings with the circle? It only goes from there. See this moon? Remember when we just looked at the crescents the moon does? It does from right to left. It doesn't do from bottom to top like that. This is bull horns. And it's also moon worship. A lot of times they'll have a sun disk setting in these bull horns, right? Especially in Egyptian stuff. Here's that sun. I'm not going to try and dig into this too much, but this is Bel. There's Bel. What page are we on? Marduk. The Babylonians worshipped a deity under the title Bel, meaning Lord, right? That comes from that that bet, that house of El, all, that of the leader, right? So it would be a bet and a lamed. And that lamed's that staff that guides you. So the house that guides you, meaning Lord, who was synchronized of Marduk. So that's the thing where I was telling you how, but there's like the A, B, C, D, E kind of connections with stuff, where you can see that like Bel is Marduk, is maybe Nimrod or something, you know, like things like that, where, oh, Bel and the dragon, huh? This is where you start getting into like Bel and the dragon, stuff like that. I think that's getting Kabbalistic, and that's where the Jewish, you're entitled to your religion, you know what I mean? But I'll tell you what, that hexagram, David never carried a hexagram. He did not. The Seal of Solomon Seal of Solomon. So we come in here and dig in. There's this, hey, what does that look like? Does that look like the so-called Star of David in the middle of that seal? What about all you people out there that are familiar with witchcraft? Is this not a consecrated circle of witchcraft? Sure is. And Solomon, King Solomon, we'll open a tab with him in it too, is often depicted with either a pentagram or a hexagram shape. Well, that's interesting. Why would it be a pentagram or a hexagram? You know? And the answer is right here. This, with this dot in the middle, especially like that, this is the talisman of Saturn. And on one side it's a hexagram, and on the other side it's a pentagram. There you go. There it is. Talisman of Saturn. Right there. That is Saturn worship. And guess what? And I know there's people, I got chewed out online, somebody had this same last name, and I was like, I'm not trying to pick on you, you know what I mean? They got really defensive. I was like, this is an old name, you know, that coincidence or whatever, that it happens to be your last name. But so if anybody has any names like this, I'm not trying to pick on any individual people or anything. Remfan, Ruffan, you know, all these similar alternate ways. It just depends. You hop a nation line over or culture line over, whatever. Everything's what you can imagine. If it sounds similar, it probably does have the same or similar meaning a lot of times. So Ruffan, Remfan, same thing. Virtually the same thing. The relevant verse reads as, "And you took up the tent of Moloch, the star of the god Rephan, the figures which you made to worship, and I will remove you beyond Babylon." Another verse that is of Amos 5:26, where the word Chiun represents Rephan, which Chiun is also another name for Saturn, which reads, "But ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and Chiun, your images, the stars of your God, which ye made to yourselves." Okay, you made those to yourselves is what the Bible is saying. If you take the prophets of the Bible, of the Old Testament, which I do, they say that, you know, here's Solomon, right? Solomon, son of David, who succeeded his father, King David, right? King David did not have that star. I could even probably go to the Wikipedia page. Star of David. I hate to even punch in those words. It's so not... There's that hexagram. It used to be red for a very specific reason. The Star of David, known as in Hebrew as the Shield of David. Oh, it's the shield now, huh? It's not a star, it's the shield, because that's where they're trying to make this little connection, is that there's mention that there's a shield of David used, and they're like, oh, well, this is what was on the shield, supposedly. No, it wasn't. Generally recognized in Judaism, shape as a hexagram, equilateral. The star or shield of David is also used in this menorah. I'm trying to find where it says it. They don't have any proof whatsoever that it is. I mean, if you come in and dig in here, you can probably. Does appear. Oh, what's this? Kabbalistic uses. You know what I mean? Come on. Give me a break. Look up Kabbalism in just a second. Kabbalistic, official as a symbol of Judaism, the Holocaust. I mean, you know what I mean? You take up these false symbols, they're going to lead you to destruction. Look at that. They led people to destruction. They're like, oh, you're Saturn's people. Well, they've got plans for you. And then they do this fake Hebraic looking, that fake Chaldean script to make it say Jude. But that's not, we know that's not Hebrew just from our little bit of talk about it today. Kabbalah. What's Kabbalah? This is what most, oh, whoa, this is Kabbalah, huh? You recognize that? Kabbalah is an esoteric. What's esoteric? There you go. There's esoteric. This is Western esotericism. Sometimes the Western mystery is mystery not related to Mithraic, mystery. Like I said, same or similar terms usually are same or similar. You come down here, it's pseudoscience, pop culture, whatever. You can look into it yourself, but when you dig in here, esotericism is the converse of the Bible. It's a universal secret inner tradition, right? Give me a break. Look at this. Oh, he's going out like what, eating a bunch of mushrooms or something, poking his head out here into the great beyond and getting told by who? Luciferians or whatever? Whatever, if that's what you believe, that you're welcome to believe it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to persecute you over it, but don't try and lie and act like this is universal, secret, and inner tradition. So is there anything that God says that's not going to be revealed to you? Like, and that's the thing with these so-called Enlightenment groups, these churches that the Protestant, which are supposed to be Protestant, the Protestant so-called groups, which were really Enlightenment groups that came over, and 100 times I can't say it enough, I'm not trying to persecute anybody, I'm just trying to reveal, they came over here, they started these churches, the Lutherans, the Methodists, all those denominational churches, you know what I mean? They give you your little book in the pew, your half-baked translation, and you get to be the lay people in the pew. You know what I mean? And then behind the scenes, you know, they're not necessarily Kabbalists. This is more specifically related to Judaism, unfortunately. What's that? Tarot related? Whatever. I'm getting out of here. They've all got stuff going on behind the scenes that is not related to the Bible whatsoever, and you're just considered a dumb pew sitting person that's just one of the masses, and they're going to just spoon feed you some morals, take a few verses of the Bible out of context, and send you on your way. So that's what's going on. We got to wake up. We got to, you know, and this is why, rightfully so, that intellectual people think religion's a joke, because they see this stuff on the surface, and they see so many of the masses going along with this crap, you know. And it's like, and I'm sorry to say it like that, but that's the way I feel when it's, you know, go be your weird religions. Go do that. That's your stuff. But don't taint it. Don't taint the word of Yahweh. Back off from that, you know. But I know that's going to happen no matter what I say. I know that's the way it goes. So I'm just exposing this. Solomon was corrupted. That's what I'm getting at here. Where's this table of contents that should jump us to it? You can't always trust Wikipedia for sure, right? But you know, it is what it is. Relationship with Queen Sheba, sins and punishment, death, succession. Was Queen Sheba? He had a lot of wives. So was there more wives up here? Wives and concubines. According to the Bible, Solomon had about 700 wives and 300 concubines. You know what I mean? So the wives were described as foreign princesses, foreign of the nations, the goyim, the pagan. Everybody foreign is pagan, according, you know, in a biblical context. They all, especially back then, you know, and even today, they have their own gods and goddesses and practices and witchcraft or not or so or whatever. Like, they have all that, right? So he had hundreds, you know, arguably 1,000 people that could be loosely described as wives, you know, 700 that could be described as wives. They corrupted him. He started practicing their religion. The only one mentioned by name is her, Solomon's successor. But yeah, if you don't know the story, read it. I need to read it again too. Solomon was corrupted. We know there's groups that hold Solomon in very high regard, right? And those groups are not exactly what I would call of the light. But you can think of them however you want. So Solomon was corrupted. That's where you get that seal came in, that witchcraft seal with the hexagram. The talisman of Saturn came in and became prominent. That was, you know, that's the hexagram of Solomon in the later years. That's not the Star of David. Give me a break. And so many people I try and tell people, them, I say, you know, with all love, I tell you this, and I just want to let you know, what you think you kind of sort of believe is real. I think it's real. Everything I study on a historic, anthropologic, scientific level, it's all real and it all points back, but that means that the whole story's real. So check it out. You don't want to cherry pick out of the Bible, you know? You got to take it for what it is. And one thing they try and throw out there is that, oh, fundamentalism's bad, right? That's one of the narratives that keeps getting pushed in waves of like, oh, fundamentalism is bad. No, fundamentalism is good. Fundamentalism is how you build a bridge that doesn't fall down. You build it fundamentally based on fundamental physics and x-raying welds and doing things and, building trusses a certain way and stuff like that. That's very fundamental, right? Radicalism is bad. When people fly off and go batshit crazy and go kill each other over stupid misunderstandings or beliefs or whatever, that's radicalism. They're trying to blur the term radicalism with fundamentalism. You know what I mean? Fundamentalism is just, in a literal sense, not in the construed sense, just means go in and get a literal idea of what's going on. That should not be a bad thing to go and get a literal interpretation of the Bible. But be careful over the years, as these years go on and get darker, that's going to be a bad thing. That's why they call it the Dark Ages. It was a bad thing to go in and look and try and read the Bible for yourself. That's fundamentalism. Just reading the Bible for yourself, studying what's under the word G-O-D or L-O-R-D. That's fundamentalism, And it's not. It's being literal. It's just being fundamental. It's just basically breaking something down to the fundamentals. Like, what are the 10 Commandments or fundamentals? Like, these are just the simple, basic root things. That's one thing with these whole reactionary politics and the way the world's going, is they don't want you to look at simple root causes that you can so easily branch from and build from and grow from. They want it to be a big mess of soup that's buried down in there. You don't want to go down to those fundamentals. You want to listen to what these people in established places of authority will tell you. Watch out for this stuff. We're going to get killed for it, But hey, do you want to die a slow death of cancer or whatever? Like, when you could die in glory for Yahweh and Yahweh Yeshua? I know it sucks to think about. At least on one hand it does, right? Like on our fleshly sense. So adhered by the Germanic people, this is the heathen religion, heathenry, Germanic, the Nordic religion. It's witchcraft, it's pagan, it's all that stuff. Gods and goddesses. Here's these festivals they do. A lot of it has to do with sex and whatever, people are welcome to practice this. That's one of the beauties of freedom of religion, right? But yeah, even the crosses. This is where crosses come from. I mean, I honestly think the cross comes from the Tau, right, in the ancient Hebrew, but the cross was very changed around later. You know what I mean? That is idolatry. To carry a cross is idolatry. Let me put that into a little bit more. This is the walls of Babylon and the temple of Bel. The house of Bel, right? Ba means house. Bel. Ba Bel. There it is, right? The Tower of Babel, they call it. But it's the Ba Bel. It wasn't called the Tower of Babel. It was the house of Bel. There's those wings. Remember those wings? Queen of Heaven. Right here. Iana Ishtar. So Queen of Heaven. If we click on this... Oh, it's got antiquity. What an interesting thing. So, for Virgin Mary, redirected from Queen of Heaven antiquity. I was wondering about this because I tried to come in a different direction before. If we just come in at Queen of Heaven, this is the surface. Oh, here's Queen of Heaven, Mother of God, which is actually related. So, this is where you might want to tune out or tune in if you consider yourself a traditional Catholic. I'm going to expose some stuff right here. I'm not trying to persecute anybody once again, but look at that. That is a pagan basilica right there. Do you see that domed roof? That looks so much. Alex Jones, all those InfoWars people that seem like they're on our side, where we're like, whatever. They always got this pagan basilica behind them. All this stuff, all these pillars. You go look in the ceilings of those. They're sun worship related and Greek gods and all that stuff all about and all up in there. That's what's all in there. Whether it's a Roman building specifically or it's a Capitol building that happens to be based on Romanism, it's all there. This is what all this stuff points back to. You don't want a part of it. Is the title Queen of Heaven is a title given to Virgin Mary by quote-unquote Christians of the Catholic Church and to a lesser extent in Anglicanism. which Anglicanism was just like what that was. They wanted to separate from the Church of England, wanted to separate from the Catholic Church per se, but they wanted to keep all the practices, but just like break out into their. It's like a little bit watered down version of Catholicism. It is. I mean, there's Lutheranism. Hey, look at that symbology. All right, it's all around all this stuff, this Mother of God stuff. But the thing is, you come in here, you're gonna get this whitewashed, so-called Christianized version of it, which a lot of Catholics think like, oh, you can christen anything, right? And they're like, one time in the Bible it says, behold your mother, right? The Savior says that on the cross right before he dies. And that's not 2 or 3 or more places where that's witnessed. That is one time. And most all of these Catholic principles, the word Catholic means universal, okay? I'm not persecuting. I'm just revealing Catholic. Catholic. I better just go straight to Wiktionary. Catholic, what does this word mean? It means universal, right there. See that? Universal, all-encompassing. That's what the word Catholic literally means. Pertaining to all kinds of people and their range of tastes. That's what it means. It's universal. Pertaining to all kinds of people and their ranges. It doesn't mean biblical. It doesn't mean anything like that. It's state universal worship. So whenever you see the word Catholic, it's signified by stuff like this. Roman, Greco-Roman architecture, which is hardcore related to paganism, sorry to say, and it means universal. So mainly the universal church, and to a lesser extent, the English church. And the denominations have carried over some of it. So you can see where that tainting, they kept the Sunday worship, all that stuff. You can worship on any day, right? So if you want to worship on the first day of the week, that's your choice, but realize that that is not a biblical Sabbath in any sort of way, and it does not refer to the Lord's Day. The reason that gets confused is because the Greeks did call, the Romans did call it the Lord's Day. That because they're sun worshipers, right, primarily. So they did call the Sunday, what they call Sunday, the Lord's Day. But the Bible-believing people, the Scripture, Messianic following people, did not refer to that day as the Lord's Day, but it's easy to construe that because of wording and whatnot, but you got to be careful about that. It's never true. You know what I mean? It's one time it's construed, and you can clearly dig in and see that that's not the truth. Okay, here you're seeing, remember that Mithraic Solimbiticus-ish type of look? Okay, I'm not trying to say this is definitely exactly that, but what are these pentagrams? Going around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them in this case, going around, maybe some behind the head that we're not seeing. And if you look right here, it's commonly crowned with 12 stars, right? And the statue of the Assumption of Mary, how perfect, assumed to be Mary, right? I don't know if that's what that, into heaven, right? That's how I'm twisting it. Woman clothed with the sun in the book of Revelations, a great wondrous sign appeared in heaven. The woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet and crowned with 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Ooh, and that's come to fruition. It really has. We are in the book of Revelations for shizzle, as far as I've seen. But this is the more modern version of the Universal Church, which was the state church of Rome. And then they decided to they couldn't kill off this so-called, what became known as Christianity, right? So they decided, well, if you can't beat them, let them join you. And that's what they did. And they wanted to make it so that people would come to this state church. So they homogenized it, making of the tastes, the universal tastes of the people. And to this day, that's what the Universal Church does when it goes to different regions, like this is Lady Fatima to some people, like depending on their region. And the reason this worked too when they went into those regions was because these people already believed in the Madonna, so they already believed in this Queen of Heaven. So it was easy to come in and sway and be like, oh, well, this is just Mary in this culture, like and that type of thing. And they literally worship this. You know, you might worship this, right? You might go to little ceremonies with your Catholic friends and they set this up in front of like another statue and then you worship it or something. That's idolatry according to the Bible. You can do that. I'm not, freedom of religion. Probably said it 100 times already. But let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy come first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. There you go. There's where bonfires were fires to this, there's Tibetan Buddhism, carries this sun-worshipping swastika, of course. All of that stuff is related. If you're a Buddhist or whatever, go look it up. Go look at where all this imagery comes from. I don't know about this one per se. This might be slightly older or newer, but it comes, all the Buddhist statues, every one of them comes from the Greeks. Okay, so don't think that, and the Greek is Rome. It's just the earlier incarnation of Rome, right? For the most part. Rome adopted a lot of the Greek stuff. It was just a little bit different. I mean, it is different, but it's as much the same as it is different. Cathedral. Here's another thing to trip out on is that cathedral, this is cathedra, right? So cathedra is where you see this is a cathedra. It's like a king's chair right here. The cathedra of this means papa or father, which the Bible says, call nobody your spiritual, in this context of spiritual father on earth, which we know that a lot of Catholics, Jesuits and whatnot go by the title of father. So you're free to believe and practice how you want. I just ask that you keep it away from us, please. A cathedra is a raised throne of a bishop in the early Christian basilica. And the dome basilicas, which I just showed before, right? We know what those are. And is related to the term cathedral, became synonymous with the seat or principal church of a bishopric. So that's where we get the term cathedral, means basically the house that holds this chair. So when you hear about a cathedral, it is centered around this chair and the person who sits on it. I'm creeped out by that. I don't know if you are, but that's one of the most creepiest things in the world to me right there. So I'll just leave that as that. The sun wheel, which I've shown enough of for now. That comes from the chariot of the sun, with that whole Sol Invictus worship, where the sun, and other names too, any form of the sun worship for the most part, where the chariot is supposed to be, this is the wheel of the chariot of the sun, which goes across the sky as the sun rises and sets. And even that word set, I think, is, the Bible uses the word even. It doesn't use the word set per se back then. Here's more of that, here I think you might have the 12 actual stars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. With this little baby figure, a lot of times they try and say this is like the baby Jesus or whatever, and maybe whoever Jesus, whatever that name means, maybe that is that. But this goes way back in time, you know what I mean? Like, this is the whole Ishtarian Diana, which I think is where the word Diana comes from. Roman Catholic Mary with child, supposedly Jesus. Again, notice the sun above her head. In the pagan world, this denotes sun worship. This is just somebody's interpretation of this stuff, not necessarily right or wrong. Here you go. You have the sun disk, the eye of Ra, in between those bull horns, with that crescent shape, like I was pointing out. The goddess Isis with Horus. The child, notice the sun disk above her head. These are, I believe they are related. The halo around here. Whatever, they're just showing a lot of it, like Nimrod Tammuz, the Sumerians. A halo or sun disk about the head denotes the sun worship. So Nimrod Tammuz, this would be that Babylonian era stuff, the Marduk era kind of stuff, all that. To my loose knowledge. See these wings sticking out here? Nimrod, I believe, is what I searched for. Or this is Imhulu. So if you come here, Imholu is a divine wind weapon used by the sky god Marduk to savage the water goddess in the Mesopotamian between the waters story of creation, right? So that's that. And if we come in here and just look up that wind weapon and dig through this Mesopotamian root of, thing, we can see here it's sort of like a pitchfork, like maybe this is where that idea of this pitchfork weapon came from. A lot of this, and when you go down through here, it's not good positive stuff, I don't think. Like, it's very witchcrafty looking, demonic-y, vampire-y kind of like context that most of this stuff seems to be used in. It's like some people seem to find this positive. I don't know how demonic stuff is positive to people. I don't want to know. But anyway, you are free to believe. Please let us be free to believe. This is the Eye of Ra. There's that sun disk. Eye of Ra. Do they have the... I think back to the Horus thing somewhere? There's Horus, and there's the Ankh symbol, which you'll see a lot, like the that one. Kind of sort of similar to a Chi-Rho, but a little bit different. There's one that's more specifically even like it. But a lot of this stuff that and this thing, this staff, is very similar to, related to the, what does that look like? I think without me even saying. It's that sort of like that Queen of Heaven with the Mithraic Statue of Liberty-esque looking thing across the top, right? And then we have some Chaldean script even right in here. Here's a basilica top. What was I even searching for here? Pagan basilica is all I punched in. And then these types of things come up. I'm not necessarily, this just whatever. Here's a pineal, like pineal gland in your head. You have an eyeball, and you have a third eyeball in your head. Get over it, or know it if you don't know it, or whatever. But that is your pineal gland. That's what this represents. You can see it on the top of a lot of these staffs. They'll have the pine cone. And then here they have on this crooked wooden weird cross thing with this body hanging from it. I don't know how much more idolatrous you can get than that. If you are going to represent, this person calls themselves often the Vicar de Christ, the vicar, in place of Christ, basically. They consider themselves the interpreter of that oracle. And they also call themselves the Papa. They call themselves the spiritual and heavenly Father, which I don't agree with that. And this is a possibility of a person that will be made, that people will be forced to worship. I'm not saying it is for sure, but there's a high likelihood that this could be the figure that the people are forced to worship. And this guy's no longer around. But what does this hat look like? Once you learn what this hat looks like, you can't unlearn it. This looks like a fish mouth to me. There's stories where they'll tell you it's a lot of things, like this means the Old Testament, the New Testament, or different things like that. It depends on which bishop person describes it, but what it ultimately is that's a fish mouth. And in the Bible we know that there is a false god, Dagon, and we'll do Dagon mitre. Now, this is not the proper Jewish mitre. And a lot of times it is confused as one. Some of these videos are good. I don't know which ones are, but it's hit or miss. You gotta check them out for yourself. So here's an example. You see this? This is the head of Dagon, the fish god of Babylon. Now look right here, and then look, there's even like these fish tail scale things coming down, and then these hats, these so-called miters, have the same things coming down. I mean, and if you really dig into the history, before, in ancient times, they were the universal church of a paganism, and they did wear those same hats. I mean, like, look at this. It's totally, there's Babylonian lion, all this stuff, sun disk-esque looking thing, like, okay, like, what do I gotta do to reveal this? Is this not revealed here? Like, oh man, do not be deceived, all right? If this is your religion, fine, that's your religion, but this is what's going on here. This is not any sort of exaggeration. I'd implore you to definitely look this up through, don't just go image search, go look for yourself, dig into historic texts and things, history itself, and it will show you that these are clearly, they definitely practice this. And when you see that so-called Jesus fish, sorry, the Isis, what? Whatever, come on page. This thing, that's Dagon worship. That's where it comes from. That's why it's a fish. Okay, it's not about how he fed the people with the fish. Okay, that's what it gets construed as, is like a more modern thing. Hey, what's that? What did we already learn this is? Huh. Give me a break. What did we just learn that this is? You know what that is. I don't even have to tell you. Okay? Just pay attention. Look at these fish. Why are there all these fish around? And what does that say? Like, whatever. These are people deceived. They think like, oh, I go to my church and everything and I put this, even the Bible on the Android phone thing that I have has this as a symbol. It was a cross, which is just as bad, honestly. Maybe slightly less bad, but whatever. I'm not gonna split hairs over it, but okay. And if this guy, he is not supposed to be, this is a crux, and a crux means a device of torture and death. That's where the cross, that term, comes from. A crucifix is a crux, and you can look it up. And then they got that little defeated, what they consider a defeated body on there. This is the defeat, is what this symbolizes, is Dagon's defeat of this figure, okay? What else could that symbolize? These people are not preaching the Bible. They're preaching Roman rights to you, if anything. They are not preaching the Bible. Well, look up crux. And before I dig too far, I'm going to show you the hardest part, huh? Cross on a coat of arms. Wooden frame on which criminals were crucified. This is the oldest. I've dug in before, and if you do your homework, you will find out this Latin etymology. This is the oldest form of it. They've added that these other things are difficult. Gallows, which literally a gallows. So, and it more specifically refers to a gallows than it does a cross per se, even though it's so commonly used to represent some kind of a cross, like, right? Look at those terms right there. That's what a crux is. That's the Latin right there. So we know what that is. So that's what a cross or a crucifix is. It represents, that's not just another way to say cross. That's a way to say like a death and torture device there. If I go back out here and we dig into the more encyclopedic stuff. Whoa, wrong thing. Did I jump the gun on that? Cross, geometrical figure, let's see. Sometimes it's hard to, ultimately from the Latin crux, or its concern. it says the word's history is complicated. It appears to have entered English from Old Irish, possibly via Old Norse. And Norse is Nordic, North, Germanic, heathen. Ultimately from the Latin crux, or its accusative crusum, and its genitive cruscus, stake cross. To make the sign of the cross. If you dig in though, it more specifically, we're on cross right now. They're speaking of the crux there. Oh, they do have. Oh, that just takes us back to the page we're at. But yeah. Oh, here we go. How weird that we had to just go through those hoops to get here. That's the way it is though. A lot of times. There it is. You know, it's an instrument for whatever. I don't want to spend too much time on that stuff, but that's what that is what am I thinking of? What is the other word of that? I did want to show something. I guess I'm gonna have to show it next time. What do we have here? What's back here? Here we have, this is the Mithraic thing, a Mithraic relief, the Mithra with the Persian hat slaying the Apis bull. Here you have the representative of the sun and of the moon with the sun deal, you know, the sun signage behind the head here of that Statue of Liberty like thing. And then right here you have this crescent, but it's more like the Apis bull horns than it is like the actual moon, even though they're showing the synonymousness of it, if that's even the right word to say. But yeah. And then there's some serpents. There's a serpent down here. That's another key part. See here, what's this this helix serpent on a stick, on a staff here, right? And you can see there's the crescent again, more of the moon worship, and then here's the Sol Invictus worship. And of course it all comes back to Persian, Mesopotamia, Babylonian, right? Cult, sun worship. That's what they're worshiping in the tombs underneath those so-called churches. They go in and they have their so-called, you know, like the whole Kabbalistic, how that word is loosely describing something that is like secret, mysterious, unknown. They're going in and they're performing those ceremonies while on the surface they're giving you whatever and they're telling you what to chant and all of that kind of stuff. So this is just a really loose, half-baked introduction to some of the stuff that's going on here. This, of course, is the Babylonian lion off of the gates of Ishtar near Iraq. Same area. Here you have it again. The moon will never appear in the sky like that to you, okay? That is not. Here's the sun and the sun disk. As far to my knowledge, you know, everybody's open their own interpretation. This, you could picture this like being very Egyptian, right, as well. Of course, they borrowed from each other. Yeah, this should be turned up. This should be either with this end up here or this end up here. It should not be down like that. That is whatever, you know, they can do whatever they want. There you go. There's more of that, like, sort of an Ankh-ish looking type of thing. I'm not trying to say it is an Ankh, but I'm just saying, you know, pay attention when you see like this circle and a stick. That circle and a stick is very representative. Okay, what's this? Is this Ishtar? Probably Ishtar, right? This is where that Queen of Heaven thing all comes back from. Is that, where did I open Queen of Heaven? Right here. Queen of Heaven, antiquity, dun, 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 dun. Venus, right? When you see that circle, even for women, when you see that circle, where I've seen a lot of these people who call themselves Christians or whatever, think they're Bible believers, and I believe they are, and they want to be, but they'll have the shield and spear of Mars, that circle with the arrow pointing out for the male symbol, supposedly. That's the shield and spear of Mars, okay? That's a deity that's a Greek deity, okay? Greco-Roman deity. Same thing with the circle, with the Ankh-like circle thing. That's the thing I was probably trying to think of. That's a symbol for Venus, okay? That's not a symbol for womanhood. They try and say that, oh yeah, you know, Venus represents womanhood, therefore you should just use this symbol. No, it doesn't. It's not. Don't use that. You're using pagan symbology. You're using pagan idolatry to represent your femininity. Is that really necessary? It's like Alex Jones trying to sell his supplements because they were used in cult Zeus worship. Okay, where is... Do I already have it open? Why is my internet so slow today? Diana, Ishtar, Diana, whatever you want to call it. The Queen of Heaven. This is, there you go, Queen of Heaven, right? Now we're way back in antiquity here. Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians. She was originally worshipped in Sumer under the name Inanna. Later by the Babylonians and all them. We're talking 4000 BC through 3100 BC, but she had little cult prior to conquest of Sargon of Akkad. With the temple across Mesopotamia, and there's those wings, of course. I probably already pointed those out. The very Babylonian-looking lion. You know, I'm sure people who are all into symbology could tell you what they think the meaning of the foot and everything is, and all that stuff. But this is where all this stuff's boiling back to, the Diana, Madonna, all that kind of worship and stuff. The Queen of Heaven kind of stuff is all, see how it's all pointing back? No matter what I go to, it's all pointing back to this gates of Ishtar, the gates of Babylon. You know, if I click into here, Ishtar Gate, it's going to talk about Nebuchadnezzar, right out of the Bible, right out of the book of Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar II. Bam! 605 BC. That is the book of Daniel right there. This is the guy who went and crawled on his belly like a beast for not, you know, this is the guy that the dream was revealed to in the book of Daniel. I don't know if I could trust Wikipedia on that. Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel statue. Okay, so you come in here, that guy that was in Babylon at those gates had this dream of this statue, which he later had built in solid gold, not just a head of gold, but the head of gold. So the head of gold was Nebuchadnezzar's empire, which was the top empire at the time, which would fall to the Medo and Persian empires, silver right here, right? And then that empire would then fall to the Greco, well, first it would be just the Greece, but the Greco and then later the Roman with the 2 legs of Rome and the feet of iron and miry clay, right? The 10 toes, what do we have here? Italy, supposedly their interpretation is Italy, France, England, Belgium, Holland, Portugal, Prussia, Austria, Spain, and Greece. Whatever, you can interpret it however you want. But this was the predictive thing. This was predicted in this era, and then these eras all came true. And the only thing left to happen to this statue is a mountain unhewed by the hand of man is going to come and crash into these feet and explode the whole freaking thing and cover the whole earth. And that's prophetic symbology for a mountain as a kingdom. That will be the kingdom of the real Savior, of the real Messiah, will come in and blast out all of these Greco-Roman, whatever, kind of trying to be world empire kingdoms throughout their existence. And the one true, this is where the rest of that prophecy of the Messiah will be fulfilled, which a lot of Jewish people claim to have denied him because they were like, he didn't come back as a king who destroyed and all this stuff. He was just the meek version, you know, he wasn't the full prophecy. Well, that's the thing. He first had to come and wash us of our sins with his blood as this meek, humble, perfect servant, and then he will come back as this destroyer. So, and it's not going to be, they're going to try and act like it's another human being. They're going to try and push this on you, so don't fall for it. When it happens, there's looks like something trying to symbolize that. Some weird, this looks too much like a flag for my liking. Yeah, there you go, coming down. There's that mountain unhewn by the hands of man. And that mountain, you know, people might try and interpret that literally like an asteroid or something. That's not what it means, literally. It's prophecy. You need to interpret prophecy according to how prophecy says to interpret itself, and that's a kingdom, like clear as day for anybody who knows prophecy. So this is one of the interesting things. If you haven't read the book of Daniel in a while, break it out, read it, read about this dream. Then you can go back to the Old Testament. Joseph, he gave a dream that's interesting to read. All these people were interpreters, like basically eunuchs, effeminate men that were very wise and able to make all these interpretations and whatnot. This is what this new, when this so-called Romanish kind of like empire, when it tries to re-establish itself, it's going to try and make you do these kinds of things. This is what the Nation of Islam, I'm not trying to judge people, but this is what they do, where they have everybody face a certain direction and pray certain times of day and stuff. That's what there was with this. It was when there were all kinds of sounds of the instrument, everybody had to stop and pray, and if you didn't, then they were going to rat you out and turn you in, and you get fed to the lions or whatever. And that's what's going on now, and they're starting this tyranny with like the mass, where they're trying to divide us with that thing and covering of the faces. It's like, come on now, that stuff's not based on science. And a lot of these people who are getting behind this are people who a year ago claimed to be more about science and not about BS virtue signaling, and that's what all these religions were, BS virtue signaling, and they're all about science. Well, now what's it come down to? They're virtue signaling with their mass, because the mass, they only filter out a certain size particles, and the virus particles that we're all supposed to be worried about, those masks don't filter out. So what's that telling us? Here's that sacred bull. You can see with the sun disk, the cobra, and the bull horns right here. What do you think that bull looked like that they were worshiping at the bottom of the mountain when Moses went up to get the 10 Commandments? And here, these are basically very similar to, oh, it's escaping me now. I can't believe I can't, does it tell us what it's called? What is that thing called in Egypt that looks like a lion? Can't believe when I just don't like study stuff for so long, I can't remember what it's called. But that's what that thing Napoleon shot the nose off of. Why can't I remember what that's called? That was driving me nuts. But that's what these basically are two of, right here. And this is how they're most often found. That one in Egypt. This is the first time in my life I've ever forgot what that thing's called. Where is my mind? This is all that bull worship stuff. Hey, what's that? Yep, we're all back. It all comes full circle. All this stuff. When you start digging into it. This reminds me of this Burning Man thing. Seems like a big thing that everybody's all happy to go and be free about, right? That's a totally satanic witchcraft festival. They used to burn people. This is an old festival. People I don't think realize how old. It's like, oh, 1986. Yeah, that's pretty old. No, we're talking like thousands of years old. Like, they used to fill that thing full of people and burn it. That's why it's called Burning Man. You know what I mean? And now they do it as an effigy, where it's like, oh, it's harmless. It's just a big fun thing where everybody goes and gathers around and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't know if they even have the links off of here to it, but they probably don't. It's probably whitewashed over. But you can see, yeah, I'm not going to look it up right now. I'll have to do that some other time. All right, trying to wind it up here. There's go on forever. Yeah, and this is another one of those. These are the two things with to do with their leadership, they supposedly. So if you're familiar, you're familiar. If not, you can study up like I need to. This is the thing with this whole Ishtar Ayana thing. Is this even the same page? This isn't even the page. Redirected from Ishtar. Weird how it like, sometimes they'll send you to certain pages, sometimes they won't. It's like, you didn't come in the right direction. Um, that or I am at Iana. Is that how come we can't get to that big Queen of Heaven? Is that it? No. Oh, what a trip! I was just there today too. But yeah, this is the Queen of Heaven. This is where this whole template of this type of worship comes from, and this is what they're pushing on people. You know, this is what these universal religions have pushed on people is they want to get you to worship their false deities so they can get you to turn away from the Bible. And that's deception. You know, if they want to go worship them in their little places or do whatever they do, that's up to them. But to come in and deceive people, do not be deceived. Do not hang on to the stuff in your flesh that tells you, like, oh, I'm used to calling him Jesus, and church is on Sunday. That's the Lord's day. That's when he rose. You know, you can tell yourself that all you want, but what are you doing? What did it say in the Bible about that you're going to turn to those things that make you feel good, that you feel are right, versus what the Bible says are right? And the Bible tells us when that day of rest is. You know what I mean? And that day will be forever, and that we should appreciate and enjoy that. So, thanks for watching.